Chapter 735. Soul. Guhan murmured. Yes. It needs the soul of its wielder. Yi Qing smiled. The Yuan-Tu and Avici swords weren't simply broken, but they had worn each other's souls away during the fight. The souls of the two sword ladies have completely disappeared. Even if the Saint Seed repaired their swords, I'm afraid the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords won't be able to transform into sword ladies after losing their souls. So, if you want to repair them completely, you have to inject a soul into the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. This soul must have a deep connection with the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. The only soul that can have such a connection is the soul of their wielder. I see. Yesterday, he wanted to refine your soul into the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, right? Hearing this, Guhan hated someone for the first time. He wanted to go out and kill him immediately. That person was the founder of Yuzhang City, the unparalleled Zhetian Jendi. Hey, isn't this what I experienced? Ji Yun suddenly said from Guhan's purple mansion. Ji Yun also injected her soul into the Duyu sword. It feels the same as Ji Yun. It's different from you, Guhan said in the purple mansion. Ji Yun's sword mark rolled in Guhan's purple mansion as if it was expressing its dissatisfaction. And then, what's your plan? Guhan looked at Yi Qing and asked curiously, since you knew that Tian needed your soul to repair the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, you still deliberately let me jump in. You must have a plan. I really can't hide anything from you, husband. Yi Qing stuck out her tongue. Logically speaking, a 70-something-year-old grandma suddenly sticking out her tongue was really not something people were used to seeing. Zhetian and I are actually the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. After the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords are repaired, whoever is closest to the two swords will be the first to obtain the ownership of the two swords. Husband, between me and Zhetian, who is closest to the two swords? Yi Qing asked with a smile. Of course you're the closest. Both of you are locked in the furnace of heaven and earth with him, but do you think your soul is necessary to repair these two swords? You don't even have a soul anymore, so what's the point of obtaining these two swords? Guhan suddenly paused here, and a terrified expression appeared on his face. Qing, you can't be thinking of, you can't be. It seems that my husband has already guessed it. Yi Qing smiled sweetly. Do you want to be the real Jendi for once? Outside the furnace of heaven and earth, Zhetian Jendi was watching the scene inside nervously. Because the entire cauldron of heaven and earth was covered in scarlet flames, Zhetian Jendi couldn't see what was happening inside the cauldron of heaven and earth. Suddenly, the scarlet flames inside the cauldron of heaven and earth began to quickly retract, as if there was a black hole in the center of the cauldron of heaven and earth, sucking in all the flames. It's fix. It's finally fix. Zhetian Jendi stood up excitedly and jogged to the transparent lid of the cauldron of heaven and earth, wanting to see what was going on inside. Zhetian Jendi didn't care even when the heat from the cauldron of heaven and earth made his skin smell like it was being roasted. Finally, all the scarlet flames disappeared, and the temperature of the cauldron of heaven and earth dropped rapidly. On this day, he finally saw what the center of the cauldron of heaven and earth looked like. Oh my Kunzu! But when Zhetian Jendi saw what was going on inside, he stumbled backwards and fell to the ground. He saw that the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords had indeed been repaired, glowing brightly with divine light and in perfect condition. In fact, they looked even stronger than before. But, the two swords weren't on the ground, but in someone else's hands, and that person's eyes just happened to look at Zhetian Jendi's position. When their gazes met, Zhetian Jendi fell to the ground in fright. He's still alive. How is that possible? Zhetian couldn't understand why the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords were in the hands of the military governor from Yangjing City. Shouldn't he have been burnt to ashes by the high temperature at the first moment? No, he's just bluffing. He's not the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords. How could he really use them? Once the lid is opened, the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords will fly back to me on their own. Zhejendi suddenly regained his confidence. The Yuan-Tu and Avici swords were definitely his, and the wielder of the military governor was just lucky enough to survive. I understand now. Yi Qing, you silly girl, you must have used up your last drop of imperial blood to save this idiot's life. Zhetian Jendi chuckled. But what's the point? So what if he survives the cauldron of heaven and earth? Does he still have the ability to survive my hands? But don't worry, if you love him so much, then I'll treat him well. I'll let him die a quick death. Perhaps that's what you're hoping for, silly girl, my silly girl. The heaven-shrouding sword emperor sneered as he stood up and looked at the transparent lid. When this furnace lid disappeared, it would be the time when he truly became a sword emperor. A minute later, when the last bit of light in front of Jetian Jendi disappeared, the moment Jendi had been waiting for had finally arrived. Come back. My Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. Jetian Jendi let out a loud cry. The Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords in Guhan's hands immediately flew towards Jetian Jendi, as if they were obeying Jendi's orders. Ha 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 ha. What's mine will always be mine. I can finally become a real Jendi. Seeing the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords flying towards him, Jetian Jendi was happy from the bottom of his heart. A serious little old man like him was actually behaving like a Chunibya. My! Jetian Jendi was about to catch the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords that he had been looking forward to for a long time. Only then did he notice that it wasn't just the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords that flew back, but also Guhan, who no longer had any killing intent. There was no complicated and intense fight, nor was there a final struggle. Without the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, Jetian Jendi was just a spirit sword wielder. In this state, Jetian Jendi couldn't even defeat the original Guhan, let alone Guhan, who was now holding the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. These two swords lightly stabbed into Jetian Jendi's body, and Jetian Jendi's heart was torn into pieces. Then, Jetian Jendi's entire body was completely torn into molecules by the innate killing sword chi released by the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. In this situation, even the golden sovereign blood couldn't save Jetian Jendi. You can actually use the innate killing sword chi, because Guhan's sword chi didn't touch Jetian Jendi's head. Relying on the sovereign blood, Jetian Jendi, who only had a head left, was still able to maintain his consciousness and start a conversation with Guhan. P.S. Actually, there's a bug in this. Because Jetian Jendi only has a head left, his vocal cords should be damaged. Jetian Jendi can't actually speak. But the author doesn't intend to change it. It's enough to make everyone laugh. Of course, I'm now the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, so of course I can use the innate killing sword chi of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. What's so strange about that? Guhan asked. No. That's impossible. I'm the wielder of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. Who do you think you are? You're just Yi Qing's lover. How can you use the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords? Tell me. Tell me. Tell me. Why is that? Why? The heaven-shrouding sword emperor's voice gradually became a little crazed. Clearly, he wanted to know what was happening in front of him. He wanted to know why Jiyu Han could use the Yuan-Tu's Avicii twin swords. He was clearly the wielder of the Yuan-Tu's Avicii twin swords. The reason is simple, it's because, just as Jetian Jendi was about to listen to Guhan's explanation, a burst of innate killing sword chi exploded in Jendi's head. Yesterday, Jendi's head had exploded like a watermelon with a Samsung Note 7 in it. Jetian Jendi had been waiting for the answer to that question even as he died. Why didn't you tell him the truth? When Jetian Jendi was gone, the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords in Guhan's hands shifted, and Yi Qing reappeared in front of Guhan. She didn't look old anymore, and had returned to her most beautiful years. She looked exactly like the sweet Yi Qing Guhan had seen in Chongyang Mountain. I heard there was a rule before the apocalypse. Bad people can't talk nonsense before killing, and they can't explain anything, or they'll die for sure. Guhan turned to Yi Qing. But we're not bad people. We're good people. Yi Qing didn't look happy at all, even though she'd killed her nemesis. Instead, she looked sad for Jetian Jendi's death. He was a pitiful man. I don't want him to die with so many questions in his head. I want him to die in peace and comfort. Yi Qing murmured. Sister Yi Qing, when I was still the Yu King, I understood one thing. I can't show any mercy to my enemies, because my enemies died because of his mercy. The King of Yu suddenly appeared behind Yi Qing and said to her. However, this King of Yu looked a little strange. Compared to the original King of Yu, the current King of Yu was taller and his figure was fuller. More importantly, King Yu's appearance changed greatly. She looked extremely similar to Yi Qing, as if they were sisters. Chapter 736. Sister Queen Yu. Oh no, I think it's more appropriate to call you Sister Avicii. Yi Qing turned around and looked at Queen Yu, who was like her own sister. She smiled and asked, "How is it? What's the difference between being an Emperor Sword mistress and a famed sword mistress?" "It's very powerful." At this point, Queen Yu's fingertip trembled slightly, then a strand of innate killing sword chi surged out from her fingertip. This strand of sword chi shot into the ground and instantly blasted open a 10-meter deep crater. This was only Queen Yu's unconscious strand of innate killing sword chi. If Queen Yu consciously controlled this strand of sword chi, it wouldn't be a problem for her to blast open a 100-meter deep crater. "I can't help but want to destroy the world. This power is too hard to control." Queen Yu looked annoyed. It seemed like she couldn't deal with this power that she had lost control of. Everyone should have guessed that Queen Yu's soul and Yi Qing's soul had entered the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, becoming the souls of one of the two swords. This was also why Guhan could use the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. At the most critical moment in the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth, Yi Qing had suggested letting her soul enter the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords and become Guhan's sword mistress so that Guhan could use the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords' power to defeat Zetian. However, there was a huge problem. Zetian wasn't dead, so the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords couldn't be synchronized again. Only Yi Qing, who was also one of the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, could use the repaired Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. This formed a paradox. Yi Qing's soul had to enter the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords to repair it. However, once Yi Qing's soul entered the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords, only Zetian could use the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords. However, this seemed to be within Yi Qing's expectations, so she quickly proposed a solution, which was to bring the soul of Guhan's sword Maiden into the Yuan-Tu and Avicii dual swords. In any case, the Yuan-Tu and Avicii dual swords were dual swords, so it was not a problem to accommodate two souls. In this way, the newborn Avicii sword was innately connected with Guhan's Zifu. The Avicii sword and the Avicii sword were originally one. Once the Avicii sword was connected with Guhan, the Avicii sword would naturally be connected with Guhan. Then, Guhan would become the master of the Avicii sword through another method. With the impending crisis, Guhan could only agree to Yi Qing's suggestion. However, Yi Qing was exceptionally firm in her choice of the sword maiden. She insisted that King Yu must enter the Avicii dual swords with her, and that no other sword maidens were allowed. When he thought of how Yi Qing used King Yu's mysterious liquid as a medium to unlock the White Dwarf key, Guhan felt that there seemed to be a special connection between King Yu and Yi Qing, so he did not object and agreed. However, this was not enough. To use a sovereign sword like the Avicii sword, one must have more than 10 million quarks of sword essence. To solve this problem, Yi Qing used a mysterious technique that even Guhan did not know about to temporarily transfer the sword essence in her body to Guhan's body. This allowed Guhan to temporarily have more than 10 million quarks of sword essence. Since Yi Qing's soul was going to enter the Avicii dual swords, it would be a waste if Guhan did not use the sword essence in his body. However, it was clear that this kind of sword essence obtained through trickery could not last long. After defeating Zetian, Guhan could feel the temporary sword essence in his body constantly decreasing. Originally, Yi Qing had transferred over 80 million quarks of sword essence to Guhan, but now there was only a little more than 30 million quarks of sword essence left. In another 20 minutes or so, all the temporary sword essence would dissipate, and the Avicii dual swords would return to their sword form. When Guhan truly had more than 10 million quarks of sword essence, the Avicii dual swords would be able to transform into sword maidens once more. However, Guhan did not take this to heart. At the end of the day, this world was still a dungeon world. Once he returned to the main world of the game, King Yu should return to his original state, and the Avicii dual swords would no longer have anything to do with Guhan. System prompt: the dungeon will close in 10 minutes. Players, please be prepared. The sudden system prompt shocked Guhan. He thought that this dungeon would not have any more system prompts. Ever since the second quest was given, the dungeon had not given Guhan any more system prompts. This was very strange. The guide on the forum clearly stated that this system prompt would continue until the 5th quest. Guhan looked at the time. The dungeon had been going on for nearly 40 hours. No wonder the system prompt said that the dungeon would close in 10 minutes. Qing'er, I have to leave in 10 minutes. Can you leave with me this time? Guhan asked as he held Yi Qing's hand, even though he knew that it was impossible. Darling, you must be joking. Qing'er's existence depends on this instance dungeon. Now that this instance dungeon is about to end, Qing'er's mission has been accomplished. Qing'er wants to go where she belongs, Yi Qing said with a smile. However, there was a hint of pity in her eyes. I owe you too much. Guhan's heart ached. If it was possible, he wanted to keep Yi Qing by his side even if he had to pierce through the sky. Darling, don't be sad. Qing'er is not dead. Qing'er is still waiting for you in the world above. Yi Qing's eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. Qing'er, I have a question. Is everything that I experienced in this dungeon real? Did you really become one with the Avici dual swords in the real world? This was the question that had been lingering in Guhan's heart since the beginning. If the history that he experienced in this dungeon was real history, then wouldn't that mean that 700 years ago, Yi Qing became the sword lady of the Avici dual swords in order to defeat Zhetian? However, according to historical records, Zhendi died 12 years after Yuzhong City was built. There were still 21 years since then. Then who played the role of Zhetian Zhendi in these 21 years? If the sword lady of the Avici dual swords was really Yi Qing, then why did Guhan have to go to another world to see Yi Qing? As long as he could find a way to synchronize with the Avici dual swords in the real world, he would be able to see the real Yi Qing. It was real, but from now on, it's fake. Yi Qing's words became incomprehensible again. Don't guess. Just wait for the right time, then, the truth will jump out on its own. Guhan rolled his eyes at Yi Qing. Fine, then I'll wait patiently. There's one more thing. It's about King Yu. I don't think I need to repeat what it is. You will definitely be able to help me, right? Of course. Qing'er is here to solve this problem. Yi Qing grinned. My husband, do you believe that I won't be able to solve this problem? Actually, you experienced so many things in the instance dungeon. At the end of the day, it's just to help little sister King Yu. Guhan was speechless. He really did not expect that such a troublesome and exciting instance dungeon was just to help King Yu. Then tell me, what should I do? Guhan pulled King Yu, who had his head lowered, to his side. What should I do? Only then can I make King Yu stay by my side forever. At the very least, I have to make it so that no one can take her away. Who else in this world can take away husband's things? Yi Qing suddenly pulled King Yu into her arms. She lifted King Yu's bangs and made the extremely shy King Yu look straight into Guhan's eyes. Husband, actually, from the moment you jumped into the electric furnace for King Yu, no one can take away your King Yu. From the moment I jumped into the electric furnace, no one can take away my King Yu. Hearing this, Guhan's first reaction was the furnace of heaven and earth. However, he immediately understood that this was wrong. After all, he didn't jump into the furnace for King Yu, but for Yi Qing. However, when he thought about it carefully, a few months ago, he had indeed jumped into the electric furnace for King Yu. That was after the Wudang sect's apex dungeon. At that time, King Yu was almost completely broken. Even a Grandmaster swordsmith could not completely repair the last wound on King Yu's body. In the end, Guhan jumped into the electric furnace without a care for his own safety and used his own body to repair the last wound on King Yu. Could it be that Yi Qing meant that after that restoration, no one would be able to take away his King of Yu title? Guhan suddenly remembered that ever since he repaired King Yu gradually lost many of her memories. For example, the memories between her and Kenzu were constantly being forgotten. Instead, the memories before she became the Sword Maiden became clearer. It seems that my husband has guessed it. Even if King Yu Go Zhenjian's original body comes online, King Yu won't leave my husband, because King Yu already belongs to my husband alone. What nonsense are you spouting? Before Guhan could react, the King of Yu became irritated. You say I'm not the King of Yu, Go Zhenjian? Then what am I? Did it pop out of a rock? As the King of Yu spoke, Over 100 innate killing pathsword cheese shot out from his body. All the nearby hills and plants were instantly razed to the ground. Smoke and dust filled the air, covering the sky and the sun. It was as if the world had entered the end of the world. Everyone had to understand King Yu's sudden outburst of emotions. It was as if one day, someone suddenly told you that you weren't you but someone else. You would probably collapse from being unable to believe reality. I don't care what you are, but you're definitely not the king of Yu, Go Jian Jian, Yi Qing said coldly. You're my husband's sword maiden, that's all. Chapter 737. That's why. Even if Yu King Go Jian Jian's main body has entered the game, Yu King will not leave me, right? Gu Han forcefully interrupted the argument between Yu King and Yi Qing. Of course, Yu King and Yu King Go Jian Jian are no longer related. Yi Qing nodded. Hearing Yi Qing confirm this point, Gu Han was speechless. That means my 40 hours of hard work were all for nothing. Even if I did nothing, Yu King will not leave me. It's like this, husband, you're too smart. Yi Qing's flattery was lacking. At the same time, in the main world of the game, in the tea house that Gu Han often drank tea at, Ku Rokin and Yu King Go Jian Jian were sitting at Gu Han's usual spot. Zhu Elvren took small sips of the tea in his hand, while the king of Yu, Go Jian Jian, closed his eyes, thinking about something. How is it? Have the fragments of consciousness returned? The anxious Ku Rokin suddenly saw Yu King Go Jian Jian slowly open his eyes and immediately asked. They're almost back. Yu King Go Jian Jian nodded slightly. I didn't expect so many things to happen in 30 years. However, these fragments of consciousness are just some boring memories. You humans haven't changed at all after 30 years. You bastards. It was unknown what Yu King Go Jian Jian's other fragments had experienced, or what experiences they had. However, from Yu King Go Jian Jian's ashen face, these fragments did not give Yu King Go Jian Jian many happy memories. There's still one missing. Yu King Go Jian Jian suddenly frowned. There's still one missing? What's so strange about that? Isn't this something that happens often? There will always be some fragments that disappear because of some shameless scum's actions. I apologize on behalf of those beasts. When Ku Rokin spoke, he was completely relying on the king of Yu, Go Jian Jian. He was afraid that if he said anything wrong, he would make this ancestor unhappy. To Ku Rokin, the king of Yu's Go Jian sword was too precious. In order to obtain the king of Yu's Go Jian sword, Ku Rokin's real body was still locked up in the prison. How could he dare to be disrespectful to the king of Yu's Go Jian sword? It has nothing to do with you. Why are you apologizing for them? The king of Yu, Go Jian Jian, and the others glanced at Zhu Elvren. If that consciousness fragment was destroyed because of some B** stars, then the system will definitely leave a message for me to tell me the whole story. But the system hasn't given me any information. More importantly, I can vaguely sense the existence of that consciousness fragment, but no matter how I call out to her, she doesn't respond. It's as if she's become an independent entity. The king of Yu, Go Jian Jian, frowned even harder. That's impossible. In the past 200 years, I've never heard of a sword maiden's consciousness fragment separating from the main body and becoming an independent entity. Did you sense wrongly? Ku Rokin asked carefully. Impossible. My senses can't be wrong. Something must have happened to that consciousness fragment. Let's go now. As he spoke, King of Yu, Go Jian's sword suddenly stood up and quickly walked out of the tea house. Lady, where are you going? Ku Rokin hurriedly ran out of the tea house. To Jianga. King of Yu, Go Jian's sword's melodious voice rang out. I want to investigate, in the past 30 years, who exactly coordinated my consciousness fragment away. Looks like our efforts weren't completely wasted. Yi Qing leaned into Gu Han's embrace and said softly. At least this dungeon allowed Qing to see husband again. Big sister Yi Qing saw husband in. There was quite a scene. You want us to work hard for 40 hours before you're willing to tell us the truth. Why didn't you tell your husband the moment he entered the instance dungeon? That way, you could have saved 40 hours of flirting with each other. How great would that be? King Yu said in a sarcastic and sour tone. So little sister King of Yu changed her address at this time. Yi Qing suddenly changed the topic and said this out of the blue. What do you mean? What do you mean? King of Yu didn't understand and asked angrily. Of course it's to call husband husband. Yi Qing chuckled. This sovereign once asked little sister King of Yu when you changed to call husband husband, but little sister King of Yu refused to answer this sovereign's question, so this became a huge question in this sovereign's heart. Who would have thought that I would change my address at this time? Actually, little sister King of Yu, you don't know, but this sovereign learned how to call husband husband from you. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand a single word. King of Yu took a few steps back and blushed. Who called that stinky thing Guhan husband? Stinky Guhan. Stinky Guhan. Stinky Guhan. You two stop messing around. There's not much time left. We have to leave the dungeon in 5 minutes. Ji Yu Han covered her mouth, which was still muttering smelly Ji Yu Han. She turned to Yi Qing and said in a serious tone, this dungeon can't be that simple. Yi Qing, tell me, what is your real purpose in designing this dungeon? Husband has wronged Qing. Qing really just wants to help husband and little sister King of Yu. Yi Qing raised her head and the corners of her eyes sparkled again. She pulled King Yu's hand and the two of them looked at each other. Little sister King of Yu, tell me, do you want to be with husband in the game forever? Don't you want to be with husband in the real world? I. King of Yu hesitated for a while before stomping her feet and replying loudly, I don't want to. I want to be with that bastard Guhan forever. Whether it's in the game or in the real world, I want to be with him forever. After saying this, King of Yu regretted it. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Well said, little sister. These are Qing words and all of us women's thoughts. There's nothing to be shy about. Who doesn't want to be with husband forever? Who doesn't want to receive husband's love every day? It's just that Qing life is short and can't always be by husband's side like little sister King of Yu. So little sister King of Yu, you must take good care of husband in the future. Let him live a long and happy life. Even if he suffers all sorts of setbacks and pain, little sister will be with husband to share and endure it. Yi Qing's words came from the bottom of her heart and were deeply moving. Not only was King of Yu moved, even Guhan's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. He wanted to keep this woman who loved him forever by his side. But big sister, if it's really as you said, then I'm just a fragment of consciousness. I'm like a lonely ghost that can only slowly drift in this game world. How can I appear by husband's side in the real world? King of Yu bit her lips and choked with sobs. I thought I could rely on my main body in the real world, but now, this is the real reason why I let you and husband come to this instant's dungeon. Yi Qing wiped away the tears on King of Yu's face. Little sister King of Yu, listen to me. Right now, you are no longer just a fragment of consciousness. You have a complete soul like every sword maiden. Right now, you only need a suitable sword maiden body. You just need to let husband find an empty sword maiden body that can synchronize with your soul in the real world. Then, just like what I taught you in the furnace of heaven and earth, borrow the flames and sword essence of the furnace of heaven and earth to enter the empty sword maiden body. Then, you will become a brand new sword maiden, a complete sword maiden, a sword maiden that is the same as all the other sword maidens. She can freely enter and exit the game and the real world and be with husband forever. Do you understand? Is what you said true? As long as I find an empty sword maiden body, I can become a brand new sword maiden. King Yu's face was filled with disbelief. She hugged Yi Qing's waist and asked over and over again with excitement and trembling. Then, she fell into a state of ecstasy. In the past 40 hours, she could finally put down the biggest stone in her heart. King of Yu fell into ecstasy, but Guhan remained calm. Perhaps the method Yi Qing told King of Yu could allow her to be reborn in the real world, but it was incredibly difficult. It was even more difficult than asking Guhan to kill the universe realm Yuan Ku. Qing, does the method you mentioned just now require the use of the furnace of heaven and earth? Ji Yu Han suddenly asked. That's right. Fusing the soul into a sword maiden body is an extremely heaven-defying matter, so it requires the power of the world. Only the furnace of heaven and earth can have this power. Husband, You must activate the furnace of heaven and earth. That's easy for you to say, but how do I get so much sovereign blood? Guhan's expression could no longer be described as unsightly. This was an unsolvable problem for Guhan. According to his experience in the Instance dungeon, if he wanted to activate the furnace of heaven and earth, he would need at least 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. This 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood was equivalent to 2/3 of Gendi's HP. You want Guhan to ask how Tien Gendi and Longsha Gendi for 2/3 of their sovereign blood? This was simply impossible. Even if Guhan was the son of Gendis, the two Gendis wouldn't give 2/3 of their sovereign blood to Guhan. Chapter 738. 5,500 cubic centimeters is the amount needed to repair the Emperor sword. A famed sword lady doesn't need that much. Yi Qing waved her hand. That's more like it. Guhan heaved a sigh of relief. If it was only a few hundred cc, then Guhan could still think of something. Guhan knew that there were more than 1,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood in Yuzhong City's treasury. Through his relationship with Liu Lei, he might be able to take out a few hundred cc for emergencies. Not much. A 4,000 cubic centimeters is enough. However, Yi Qing's following words made Guhan's face turn ashen. To Guhan, 4,000 cubic centimeters and 5,500 cubic centimeters didn't seem to make much of a difference. If Guhan could get 4,000 cubic centimeters, then it wouldn't be difficult to get 5,500 cubic centimeters. In any case, he couldn't get it. Husband, don't worry. Qing'er has already thought of this for you. Yi Qing smiled and said, 700 years ago, someone wrote an IOU to Qing'er. Although this IOU isn't much, it's not a problem for husband to exchange for more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood. More than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood. That's not much. What kind of IOU did that person write to Yi Qing for it to be worth more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor blood? The value of this Emperor blood was probably enough to buy 1/10 of Yuzhong City. Where is the IOU? Guhan asked. Qing'er has already told husband the address of the IOU. Husband only needs to go and get it yourself. Yi Qing's words became strange again. When did she tell Guhan the address of the IOU? However, Guhan seemed to understand what Yi Qing meant. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll try to find it there. Don't worry, husband." Qing'er promises husband that the IOU is still there. Yi Qing smiled. Emperor blood is only one problem. The more important thing is the sword lady's body you mentioned. Do I need to find a broken sword lady to be King Yu's new body? King Yu was currently using the broken Avici sword's body. Did he want Guhan to break the Avici sword again and replace it with King Yu's body? No. Yi Qing shook his head and said, the sword lady's body needs a pure body, and there can't be a soul inside. All the sword maidens that were broken did not really die. Their souls were still hidden in the sword. Otherwise, how could those sword maidens that were broken even talk about being repaired? If King Yu wants to be reborn, he must have a sword maiden body that has lost its soul. A normal sword maiden definitely won't do. Nonsense. Then why would the UN2 Avici twin swords work? King Yu retorted. Because the souls of UN2 and Avici swords have completely perished. Yi Qing sighed. When I was ambushed by Zetian and was about to die at the hands of the Jade Emperor, it was UN2 who sacrificed her soul to self-destruct. She gravely injured the Jade Emperor and destroyed Avici's soul as well. Therefore, the UN2 and Avici twin swords have long lost their souls. King Yu, you are able to occupy the Avici twin sword's body. I see. King Yu nodded in understanding. Then we just have to find the sword maiden's body whose soul has also perished. I remember that many sword maidens in history reached this step. There were even 2 immortal sword maidens. That's impossible. Yi Qing did not speak. Guhan said directly, according to the agreement between us humans and sword maidens, if the sword maiden's soul completely disappears and cannot be repaired, humans will melt their bodies once again and scatter them into this land. They will return to where they came from. Since ancient times, all the sword maidens have been buried like this. It is impossible for us to find the Sword Maiden's body whose soul has perished. Don't worry. If the past is gone, then I'll just wait for the future. In 8 to 10 years, there will be an unlucky Sword Maiden that will appear. At that time, I will be too embarrassed to disturb her rest. King Yu said. No, that's too passive. Guhan shook his head. This kind of thing is rare. Even if I wait 8 to 10 years, I might not encounter such an opportunity. What if it doesn't come in 8 to 10 years? What if it doesn't come in 30 to 40 years? Then King Yu, won't you forever? This is already the best ending. What else can I ask for? Facing Guhan's objection, King Yu smiled freely. Originally, I didn't have any hope when I came to this dungeon. I just want to be able to spend some time with you, husband. Every minute counts as a minute for me. Then, before I receive the summons from the main body, I will erase all of my memories. I will never let you down. Even if the situation is better, I will only be separated from the game and locked in a cage that will never see the light of day. Right now, I am already very satisfied. Although I can't enter reality, I can return to my previous life. Every day, I will sit in the house and wait for my husband to come online, whisper a few words to me, do some embarrassing things. Actually, this kind of life is already very perfect for me. I don't have any more extravagant wishes. Husband. Listen to King Yu, let this matter end like this. Actually, our lives haven't changed at all. It's still the same as before, isn't it? When King Yu said this, she was choking with sobs. With a trembling voice, she threw herself into Ji Yuhan's arms, and then she burst into tears. Everything will be fine. Seeing this, Yi Qing revealed a mysterious smile and slowly walked behind King Yu. He patted her back and whispered into her ear, Don't worry, King Yu, I'll be fine. Husband. It's time, Qing'er has said all that needs to be said. Please take care of yourself, husband. Qing'er will see you again sooner or later. Yi Qing looked at Ji Yuhan with the same hot tears in her eyes as she said. Qing'er, wait, I still have something to say. Before Guhan could finish, the entire world darkened. When light once again appeared in front of Guhan, Guhan had already arrived in a steel forest. Hello, Cashier 0791 is at your service. Seeing the familiar beautiful Cashier 0791, Guhan knew that he had returned to the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. Rise from the ground had already come to an end. There was nothing much to say after that. Guhan completed all the quests on the quest list and naturally received an SSS rating as a reward. After the Instance Dungeon ended, the rewards given to Guhan were routine. The only thing worth looking forward to was the treasure that the golden egg at the end could produce. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have opened the golden egg and obtained a precious bottle of Emperor's blood, 20 drops. Guhan opened the golden egg and obtained a bottle of 20 drops of Emperor's blood. Emperor's blood. Healing item. Tradable. Unbound. Drops upon death. Quantity, 20 drops. Description: Gendi's blood can quickly recover the player's injuries and the sword essence in the player's body. Usage effect: each drop of Emperor's blood can recover 50% of the player's body damage and recover 100,000 sword essence points. Remark: the sword essence points recovered cannot exceed the player's sword essence limit. Looking at this reward, Guhan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Whatever he wanted, it really came true. If this small bottle of 20 drops of Emperor's blood was sold, it could be sold for at least 1 million renminbi. However, these 20 drops of Emperor's blood added together was probably less than 1 cubic centimeter. Guhan needed more than 4,000 bottles of such Emperor's blood. In terms of money, it would be 4 billion. But then again, if Emperor's blood could really be bought with money, then Guhan couldn't ask for more. Because at this time, Guhan's account had a total of 72 billion renminbi. This was the gambling reward that Guhan had obtained from defeating the number 1 sword wielder of the Spirit Sword level in the 8-city sword tournament. Because there were less than 100 players who bought this option in the entire game, and among these 100 players, only Guhan had bet more than 10 million. Therefore, of the nearly 80 billion renminbi that all the players had bet on Guhan, in the end, more than 89% of it went into Guhan's account. Unknowingly, Guhan had become one of the richest people in the human world. If there was a ranking list of the richest people, Guhan would probably be able to rank around 100. Taking out 4 billion to buy Emperor's blood was just a small gesture for the current Guhan. Unfortunately, this was not realistic, because in the real world, Emperor's blood that could be traded didn't even have 40 cubic centimeters, let alone 4,000 cubic centimeters. Even if Guhan wanted to buy it, he wouldn't be able to find a place. Right now, it seemed that he could only pin his hopes on the promissory note that Yi Qing had left behind. Ding dong, system prompt, all-channel broadcast. Player military governor has broken the highest dungeon evaluation record for the dungeon Rise from the Ground. The original record of SS has been broken, and the new record is SSS. Let me congratulate player military governor, he has created a new era. In the game, this system prompt rang in the ears of all the players. However, at this time, the players were very calm, as they were already used to this kind of thing. It was military governor, after all. What was so strange about him breaking 1 or 2 dungeon records? If military governor failed to complete a dungeon, it would be super news. Therefore, even after the system prompt rang out 3 times, there was no commotion in the sword tower. Everyone was still focused on what they were doing. A sword mistress suddenly raised her head, her face full of shock. Someone actually got an SSS evaluation in the Rise from the Ground dungeon. Yu King Go Jian's face was full of disbelief. Someone actually got an SSS evaluation in this dungeon. Is that strange? Ku Rokin, who was sitting opposite Yu King Go Jian, said with his mouth twitched. Of course it's strange. Yu King Go Jian said as he sat upright. 90 years ago, I entered this dungeon with the sword-bearer at that time. The two of us tried almost 200 times, increasing the completion speed of all the missions on the list to the maximum. We completed all the missions from 1 to 40, but we couldn't activate the last 10 missions, and could only get an SS evaluation. Later on, the sword-bearer and I discovered a fatal bug in the game, so we concluded that this dungeon could at most have an SS evaluation. We even wrote the most complete dungeon strategy. In this world, no one can get an SSS evaluation. Alright, so the strategy Guhan found on the forum was written by Yu King Go Jian and her swordbearer at that time. Chapter 739. There's nothing strange about it. It's because the military governor was the one who completed the quest. Ku Rokin shrugged. It was obvious that he was impressed by the military governor. He instinctively thought that the military governor deserved an SSS rating. It seems like you have a very high opinion of him. Do you know this military governor? Although he had not spent much time with Ku Rokin, the king of Yu Go Jian, who had over 1,000 years of experience, could easily see through Ku Rokin's nature. He knew that he was a teenager who refused to admit defeat. To be able to convince such a Chunibya youth so naturally and wholeheartedly, this inspector was definitely not a simple fellow. I've never seen the military governor in the game, but I've seen the military governor in real life. His name is Guhan in real life. He's the master of our Yuzhang city's previous Kendo cabinet master and the current Kendo cabinet master. Ku Rokin was such a disloyal guy. With just a few words, he revealed Guhan's background to the king of Yu Go Jian. The previous Kendo cabinet master? Then wouldn't he be an old man in his 70s or 80s? Why would he still be interested in clearing a famed sword-level dungeon? The king of Yu Go Jian asked in confusion. I didn't tell you that he's an old man in his 70s or 80s, Ku Rokin quickly said. I think he just turned 18 this year, the same age as me. He's just a famed sword wielder. Oh, that's right. Speaking up to this point, Zhu Luren suddenly thought of something. His famous sword rank sword lady is the same as mine. They're both yours, your highness. What? Say it again. Who's his famed sword lady? The king of Yu Go Jian suddenly became anxious. It's all because of you, my lady. Ku Rokin did not know what the king of Yu Go Jian was worried about. He replied dryly, I don't know who his famed sword tier sword mistress is in real life, but I can confirm that his in-game famed sword tier sword mistress is the king of Yu Go Jian. This is something that all the players in the game know. The sword maiden that he used in the 8 cities sword tournament was you, my lady, Pa. The king of Yu Go Jian, forcefully closed the booklet in his hand. The sound was so loud that everyone around him jumped in fright. I know what it is. Seems like the key to the problem lies with this military governor. Take me to him now. With that, the king of Yu Go Jian put down his book and dragged the confused Ku Rokin out of the sword pavilion. The booklet that the king of Yu Go Jian left on the table had a name written on it, the list of previous king of Yu Go Jian's swordbearers. This was a list that only the sword lady could read. It recorded the names of all the swordbearers that had coordinated with the sword lady. It seemed like the king of Yu Go Jian did not find the military governor's name on the list. Is he still in the game? Song Yifei quietly pushed open a door and saw that Ji Han was still lying on the bed with his helmet on. He could only sigh slightly, and then poured all the delicious food on the table into the trash can. It's been almost 2 days. Why hasn't Guhan come out yet? If this goes on, Guhan's body won't be able to take it. Song Yifei was extremely worried about Guhan's body, but there was nothing she could do. She could only painstakingly prepare a table full of delicacies. When she realized that Guhan did not show any signs of waking up, she dumped all the delicacies on the table into the rubbish bin. Let me rest for a while. Song Yifei quietly pushed open the door and tiptoed into Guhan's room. She bent her body and lay down beside Guhan. As Guhan was sleeping on a single bed, and Guhan was sleeping in the middle of the bed, there was not much space for a person to sleep on either side of the bed. Song Yifei could only curl up her body and try her best to ensure that she did not fall off the bed. One could imagine the quality of sleep in such a situation. It was almost impossible to have a good night's sleep, but Song Yifei still enjoyed it. For the past 2 days, Song Yifei had used this method to sleep beside Guhan. She used an extremely humble and pitiful position to enjoy the time she spent with Guhan. Who is it? Suddenly, Song Yifei felt an arm around her waist, and Guhan's low voice sounded in her ears. It's me. Song Yifei. I'm just tired. Take a little rest. I'll leave right away. Song Yifei, who was embarrassed, wanted to escape from Guhan's bed immediately. However, she did not expect that Guhan's hand was tightly around Song Yifei's waist. Song Yifei used all her strength but could not break free from Guhan's hand. Instead, Guhan hugged her tighter and tighter. In the end, her whole body exploded in Guhan's arms. I like the smell of your body very much. Let me sleep quietly for a while. Guhan's low voice made Song Yifei's whole body numb. He likes the smell of my body very much. Thinking of what Guhan had said, Song Yifei's whole body became soft, and she did not have the strength to escape. He could only allow himself to become a human-shaped pillow and be hugged by Ji Han. After struggling with himself for a while, he fell into a deep dream in a daze. This was the best sleep Song Yifei had had in the past 2 days. Song Yifei and Guhan were awakened from their sweet dreams by a series of rapid knocking on the door. After knocking for about 10 minutes, Song Yifei, who was in a daze and disheveled, climbed up from Guhan's side angrily and opened the door. What are you knocking for? Knock me to death. As soon as she opened the door, Song Yifei scolded the person in front of her. It was an unlucky young man who was scolded by Song Yifei. He took out a handkerchief to wipe the saliva off his face and asked fearfully, "Excuse me? Does Master Guhan live here?" "Yes, he is resting." "Why are you looking for him?" "It's the same if you tell me." At this time, Song Yifei had mostly recovered his calmness. He no longer put on a sour face, and his temperament became gentle. Especially when Song Yifei said, "It's the same even if you tell me." His whole body was filled with a sense of satisfaction. "Mrs. Jiu, hello. I am a member of the Public Traffic Safety Department of Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. I have some questions to discuss with Master Guhan. Is it convenient for you now?" This poor young man was indeed a member of the Public Traffic Safety Department of Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. Song Yifei immediately smiled when he heard the words Mrs. Jiu, and he very warmly invited this young man into his home. After some unsmooth communication, Song Yifei finally understood why this member of the Ministry of Transportation was looking for Guhan. It turned out that he was looking for Guhan because of the white shadow speeding case that shocked the entire Beijing's Ministry of Transportation. The whole Ministry of Transportation was scolded by the Beijing City Council. The leader who was in charge of this incident was directly removed from his position, and it was said that the minister of the Ministry of Transportation was also involved in a lawsuit. Although the council did not remove him from his position, the higher-ups had already given the order. After the next round of election of the council, this 50-year-old minister of the Ministry of Transportation with a bright future would directly retire and go home to be an old cadre who cared about society. The personnel change in the Ministry of Transportation was just the beginning. What gave the Ministry of Transportation a bigger headache was how to deal with the perpetrator of the white shadow speeding case. The identity of the person who was speeding was very easy to check. After all, Guhan got out of the car in front of more than a dozen surveillance cameras. In less than an hour, the Ministry of Transportation had confirmed Guhan's identity. But it didn't matter if they didn't confirm it. Once they confirmed it, it gave the Ministry of Transportation a bigger headache. Because this person was not an ordinary person, but a sword-bearer from Yuzhong City. This sword-bearer was the F*King, former head of Yuzhong City's sword garret. With so many identities in front of the minister of the Ministry of Transportation, the minister directly resigned and went home in advance, leaving the hot potato to his successor. If Guhan was not the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City, but the sword-bearer of Yangjing City, it would not be too troublesome. The case would be directly reported to the Yangjing City Sword Committee, and the rest would be handled by the Yangjing City Sword Committee itself. There was no need for the Ministry of Transportation to manage anything. Unfortunately, Guhan was the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City. Although, in theory, once a sword-bearer of Yuzhong City committed a crime in Yangjing City, the Yangjing City Sword Committee also had the right to deal with this sword-bearer. But in fact, the Yangjing City Sword Committee could not intervene in this case. Because, from a legal point of view, this was not a case serious enough to require the Yangjing City Sword Committee's management. This was just an ordinary speeding case. Moreover, this speeding case didn't cause any casualties, nor did it cause any serious consequences. If the Yangjing City Sword Committee took over this case, it would obviously give everyone the feeling that the big was bullying the small, not to mention that Guhan was the former head of Yuzhong City's sword garret. The Yangjing City Sword Committee had to obtain the approval of the Human Sword Committee. Therefore, the Yangjing City Sword Committee simply ignored this case and pretended not to know about it, lest it got into trouble if it intervened. Even the Yangjing City Sword Committee did not want to intervene, so the Yangjing City Ministry of Transportation naturally did not want to intervene. But this case had a very bad influence. Many people in Yangjing knew that there was an arrogant man from Yuzhong City who dared to drive a sports car around in Yangjing City, which meant that he did not respect the men in Yangjing City at all. Some lazy men who had nothing better to do all day even went to the council to protest. As a result, the council issued a strict order to the Ministry of Transportation to solve this case perfectly. Otherwise, nobody in the Ministry of Transportation would be able to get away with it. After 2 days of chaos caused by the resignation of the Minister of Transportation, the newly appointed Minister of Transportation very unkindly threw this hot task to an unlucky staff member who had been in the Ministry of Transportation for less than a year, who was standing in front of Songafei, and asked him to invite the sword-bearer Guhan to the Ministry of Transportation to solve this case. Chapter 740. When Songafei understood the whole story, she was shocked to realize that she couldn't make the decision for Guhan. She didn't know why Guhan would do something like racing, nor did she know how to reply to this young man for Guhan. Do you want Guhan to go to the Ministry of Transportation now? Songafei decided to clarify the matter first. If possible, now is naturally the best time. The clerk silently observed Songafei's expression. When he saw that she looked unhappy, actually, it was an expression of not knowing what to do, he immediately waved his hand and changed his words. Actually, it's not necessary to go today. I'm just here to inform Sir Guhan. As long as Sir Guhan can rush to the Ministry of Transportation to deal with this matter within 3 days, there will be no problem. Within 3 days. Songafei was still muttering to herself. She didn't know if she should agree to Guhan's request. Therefore, the atmosphere in the living room suddenly became gloomy. Sure. I'll be there within 3 days. At this moment, Guhan, who was also disheveled, walked out of Song Yifei's bedroom and said to the unlucky clerk. The clerk immediately got up to leave as if he had been pardoned. As he left, he even bowed and said that he had disturbed Sir and Madam's sweet dreams and hoped that Sir and Madam wouldn't be offended. What exactly is going on? Guhan, why did you race when you were fine? As soon as the clerk left, Song Yifei immediately got up and asked Guhan. I can't explain it to you in a short time. Anyway, it has nothing to do with you. Guhan didn't have any ill intentions, but in Song Yifei's ears, it became Guhan's disgust and indifference towards her. This made Song Yifei's expression instantly dim. The sweet smile on her face also became extremely awkward. She stood up and walked in the direction of the kitchen. She said that she was going to prepare dinner for Guhan, but in reality, she wanted to escape from this painful and embarrassing place. Guhan didn't have time to care about Song Yifei's feelings. Right now, the matter with King Yu was more important to him. Although there was some progress and King Yu expressed that he was willing to wait for the Sword Lady's soul to dissipate before considering coming to the real world. However, Guhan did not want to do this. Guhan knew better than anyone how much the King of Yu wanted to return to reality. He definitely would not let the King of Yu wait for another 8 to 10 years. He had to solve this problem immediately. After Guhan sent the clerk away, he immediately accessed the internet through his personal terminal and began to search for information on all the broken sword maidens since ancient times. He wanted to see if there was a broken sword maiden that had lost its soul but did not melt. It was not an easy task to find such information. This was because this involved a whole 1,000 years of time. If there really was such a broken sword maiden, the officials would definitely try their best to hide this information and would never openly post it on the internet. If Guhan wanted to find the information he needed, he had to find all sorts of clues on the internet and then use these clues to find a possibility. Unfortunately, when Song Yifei's dinner was ready, Guhan still did not find any clues. Let's eat first. Only when we have strength can we get to the next thing. Song Yifei, who had readjusted her emotions, appeared beside Guhan with a table full of delicacies. This time, Guhan did not refuse. Song Yifei finally got her wish of letting Guhan taste her cooking. She stared nervously at Guhan's face, wanting to see Guhan's expression clearly. She wanted to see how he would react to the delicacies she had painstakingly made. After eating 2 mouthfuls of rice, Guhan suddenly put down his chopsticks. This made Song Yifei feel uncomfortable. Was her cooking that bad? Was it not compatible with his cold appetite? Qingpin, Ji Yun, come out for dinner, Ji Yuhan shouted towards the bedroom, and Qing Qiu and the others rushed out like hungry ghosts. They all grabbed the advantageous position next to the table and swept the entire table like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. Delicious. Delicious. It's so delicious. Compared to Guhan's stinginess, Qingpin did not cherish her compliments. She coaxed Song Yifei and brought out the stew that had been prepared for Qingpin in the kitchen. What Song Yifei did not know was that in the mouth of Qingpin, who had been starving for 2 days, everything that could be eaten was delicious. Guhan, Qingpin, Ji Yun, Yi Tian, Juzi. When everyone sat at the table and ate happily, Song Yifei suddenly felt a strong sense of satisfaction. In her eyes, although she was the mistress of the family, Guhan was naturally the male master of the family. Therefore, Qingpin and the others were naturally the children of the family. Song Yifei enjoyed this feeling very much. She only hoped that time could stop here for a little longer. But damn it, an ungrateful knocking sounded at the door again. Who is it? Can't you let me eat? When Song Yifei opened the door angrily again, she could not finish her words. Because the person standing outside the door was not an ordinary person, but the tiger raw sword spirit who was smiling awkwardly. Yifei, I haven't seen you for a long time, and your temper has grown. The tiger raw sword spirit's words made Song Yifei want to find a hole and hide in it. She quickly pulled the tiger raw sword spirit to the table and asked him to eat. However, the tiger raw sword spirit waved his hand and said, I came here after eating. I have something important to talk to Guhan about. You guys eat first. Guhan did not say anything, but he quickly put down the bowl and chopsticks to show his attitude. The tiger raw sword spirit immediately followed Ji Yuhan into the small room and slammed the door shut, leaving Song Yifei alone with a sad expression on his face. Dean Tiger Roar, are you looking for me because of Ku Rokin? Before the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit could speak, Guhan said what was on the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit's mind. Indeed, nothing can be hidden from you. That's right, I'm here because of Ku Rokin. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit heaved a long sigh. It's been 2 days. I've been contacting the Yangjing City Sword Committee for the past 2 days, trying to meet Ju Elvren, but they're unwilling. I have no choice but to discuss it with you. I'm just a pawn, what good ideas can I have? Guhan did not even believe what he said. He simply did not want to care about Ku Rokin. He was not the Virgin Mary. Ju Elvren coordinated the departure of the King of Yu, Go Jian Jian. The fact that Guhan did not kill Ku Rokin and used the sword Maiden grafting technique was already Guhan's leniency. Guhan, stop pretending. The chairman told me before we left. He said that in the whole of Yuzhang City, you are the one with the most wicked ideas. If I encounter any difficulties, I will definitely come to you to discuss it. I really have no other way. Otherwise, as the Dean of Yuzhang Academy, I would be too embarrassed to come to you to discuss it. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit had put it this way. If Guhan continued to refuse, he would not be able to face the world anymore. What reason does Yangjing City have to stop us from seeing Ku Rokin? Ji Yuhan frowned. Actually, at the end of the day, Zhu Luren's mistake was merely to disobey Sword Immortal Tian Hen and forcefully clash with the King of Yu, Go Jian. Although this is a mistake, it is not a big one. What's more, Yangjing City's Sword Pavilion has already violated the unspoken rules between the Sword Pavilions. If they really wanted to discuss it face to face, Yangjing City would be the one to lose face. And even if we are the ones at fault, as long as we follow the normal procedures, Yangjing City would not be able to refuse our visit. At this point, Guhan looked at the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit suspiciously. Sir Dean, you are not going to soften in front of the Yangjing City Sword Committee, are you? Did you not even say a single word? Of course I did. I almost got into a fight with them in front of the Sword Committee. The Tiger Roar Sword Spirit smiled even more bitterly, but they did not use the reason you just said to refuse me. They said that Ku Rokin colluded with Yuan Ku and brought Yuan Ku into Yangjing City. They even cooperated with Yuan Ku to launch a sneak attack on Yangjing City's Sword Pavilion's Lord, Sword Immortal Tian Hen, and almost seriously injured Sword Immortal Tian Hen. They said that Ku Rokin has committed a heinous crime, and before the official trial, no one is allowed to see him. At this point, the Tiger Roar Sword Spirit slapped his thigh anxiously. I just don't understand. If Ku Rokin really brought Yuan Ku into Yangjing City, then the dozen or so inspection systems and the hundreds of Yuan Ku scanners along the way are all deafening. Are they broken? No matter how they lie, they don't even have a draft. Yuan Ku. Guhan recalled the sudden turn of events in the Sword Pavilion. With just a few beams of light, the little lowly who called Ku Rokin Daddy had actually petrified Sword Immortal Tian Hen. It was also because of this petrification that fate played a huge joke on Guhan, forcing Guhan to stay by his side for more than 40 hours without rest. Only then did he think that he could keep the King of Yu by his side and find a way to deal with it. This powerful petrification ability and the 9 snake-like hair that shot out from the little lowly's head made Guhan think of Medusa, who was deeply entangled with him. In the battle in Yuzhang City, Medusa had self-destructed her godhead and disappeared without a trace. At that time, Guhan thought that Medusa was definitely dead, so he did not pay much attention. Now that he thought about it, Guhan suddenly realized that after Medusa self-destructed, no dimensional vortex appeared. Did this mean that Medusa was indeed not dead? Then, Medusa transformed into a little girl named Sasha and lurked by Ku Rokin's side in an attempt to launch a fatal sneak attack on humans. Dean, do you know where that little girl named Sasha is being held? Guhan said indifferently. Actually, the crux of the matter is not Ku Rokin at all. What's really important is that little girl named Sasha. We have to figure out if she is Yuan Ku. It's best if she isn't. Then, they have no reason to keep Comrade Ku Rokin imprisoned. If she is, then Comrade Ku Rokin has been bewitched by Yuan Ku. Let him kill that Yuan Ku with his own hands, and the matter will be over. Judging from this line, This is the standard line of a villain. Chapter 741. In the end, Guhan did not intervene in the matter of Ku-Rokin. This was not something that Guhan should take care of. On the contrary, Guhan felt that if he intervened again, it might have the opposite effect. After all, Sword Immortal Tianhen was very displeased with him, and he was the direct victim of this matter. His decision would obviously affect the final result of Ku-Rokin. Oh, there is one more thing I have to inform you. When the Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger was about to leave, he suddenly remembered something. I'm afraid that the Yard Assembly, which is scheduled for 3 days later, will be postponed again. What's going on? Guhan was confused. The 8 Academies Assembly had clearly been postponed for a month. Why would it be postponed again when it was about to start? I heard that there is a big problem in Shanhai Pass. The Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger said, I heard that among the 12 Zhu-Wus outside Shanhai Pass, 2 of the Zhu-Wu seals are weakening, and they may break through the seals if they are not careful. Therefore, Hao Tianjendi took the initiative to invite Longsha Jendi to reinforce the seal of Shanhai Pass. Longsha Jendi is tied up by the affairs in London, so he will have to wait for more than 10 days before he can come. If Longsha Jendi wants to come, then come. What does it have to do with the 8 Academies Assembly? Guhan pursed his lips. He obviously had a very bad impression of Longsha Jendi. I heard that Longsha Jendi took the initiative to ask to see the strength of the younger generation of the 8 base cities, so the Sword Committee decided to postpone the start of the 8 Academies Assembly until Longsha Jendi arrives. The Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger also looked somewhat disdainful. However, the Sword Spirit Roaring Tiger and Guhan were disdainful for different reasons. Guhan was disdainful because of Longsha Jendi's shameless act of snatching the Shenyuan sword. As for the Tiger Raw Sword Spirit, it was because Longsha Jendi had slacked off during the most critical time of Yuzhang City. Hao Tianjendi, who was being attacked by 2 desolate grade Yuan Ku at the same time, rushed to Fort Yuyang at the most dangerous moment to cover the humans' retreat. But Longsha Jendi was said to have just wandered around the Pacific Ocean, had a cup of tea with Jehovah, and then returned home. All right then, how could we dare to go against Jendi's will? Let's wait for a few days. I also want to see Longsha Jendi with my own eyes. Guhan laughed. Dean, there is something I want to ask you. What is it? As long as I know, I will tell you. The Tiger Raw Sword Spirit said with a smile. Forget it, it's the same whether I ask or not. Guhan originally wanted to ask the Tiger Raw Sword Spirit about the body of the Sword Lady, but after thinking about it, he gave up. The Tiger Raw Sword Spirit probably didn't know as much as he did. In the following time, Guhan continued to look for clues on the body of the Sword Lady on the internet. Although he found some possibilities one after another, when he thought about it carefully, it was not the case at all. Guhan worked hard all night, but still found nothing. The next morning, when the exhausted Guhan was about to go to bed and rest for a while, someone knocked on the door of Song Efei's house. But this time, it was not an outsider, but Guhan's precious apprentice, Lu Shihua. Since Guhan quit the game, Lu Shihua had not been at Song Efei's house for most of the day, and he didn't know where she had gone. Master, you finally quit the game. I thought you were still in the game. Seeing Guhan appear in front of her, a happy smile finally appeared on Lu Shihua's face, which was full of pain and exhaustion. Then, the master and apprentice talked for a while, and Guhan finally understood the reason for Lu Shihua's disappearance. It turned out that she was called by Liu Lei to attend a meeting at the Sword Committee headquarters. As the master of Yuzhang City's Sword Garret and the most powerful person in Yangjing City, Lu Shihua was naturally qualified to attend the daily meeting of the Sword Committee headquarters. Originally, Lu Shihua could also not attend this regular meeting, because this was usually the responsibility of a permanent representative of Yuzhang City sent to the Sword Committee headquarters. However, Liu Lei forced Lu Shihua to attend this regular meeting in the name of training her, so Lu Shihua had no choice but to agree. After all, she was Liu Lei's apprentice. One could imagine how painful it was for Lu Shihua to attend such a regular meeting. Because among the participants of the entire regular meeting, except for the secretaries who were responsible for taking notes, the rest were all sword holders. Among them, The representatives of each base city were all sword holders at the spirit sword level. As an ordinary person, Lu Shihua had to endure how many supercilious looks, how much contempt, how much indifference, and how much disdain. Everyone could imagine it. In this case, Lu Shihua's not emotional collapse was already a manifestation of her strong heart. Grandmaster is doing this for your own good. When you can face this calmly, even if you are just an ordinary person, you will also be a real master of the sword garret. Guhan touched Lu Shihua's head and said. Lu Shihua closed her eyes comfortably. Master, you told me that as long as I go to Yangjing City, I can become a sword holder. Why don't you fulfill your promise? Lu Shihua, who closed her eyes and enjoyed the moment, suddenly said. Wait. You saw what happened with Ku Rokin. Now Yangjing City's sword garret and we are like fire and water. If you go to coordinate with the double-winged angel sword now, you will only be humiliated by them. When I find a suitable opportunity, I will take you to coordinate with them, Guhan said. Master, you have the final say. I have no objection. Lu Shihua smiled. Indeed, she didn't care much about the matter of being a sword holder. What did you talk about in the regular meeting? Guhan suddenly became curious. The regular meeting of the Sword Committee was like the standing committee meeting of the Politburo before the apocalypse. Everyone in China was full of curiosity about this meeting and wanted to know how it was going to be carried out. It's just some boring things. They just need to report what happened in their base cities and then complain to the headquarters of the Sword Committee, hoping that the headquarters of the Sword Committee can allocate some resources or send some sword-bearers to help them. Lu Shihua stuck out her tongue. Obviously, she had no interest in this meeting. She didn't even care about the content of the meeting. She only remembered to tell Guhan. You must be tired. Go and rest. I also need to sleep. Guhan waved his hand, indicating that Lu Shihua could leave. Oh. By the way, Master, something big happened in Yuzhang City. I just received the news from the meeting. Lu Shihua suddenly patted her head and said. What big thing? Could it be that those old guys from Mount Di are up to something again? Ji Yuhan asked. No, it's a problem with a sword forger who was locked up in prison. Lu Shihua tried hard to recall. It seems that the Sword Committee carried out some secret plan on him. In the end, the sword forger messed up and destroyed the soul of a broken natural sword maiden that was sent for an experiment. It was said that the broken natural sword maiden could no longer be repaired. The old guys in the Sword Committee were so angry that they wanted to kill the sword forger. Anyway, the meeting was a mess. Now that I think about it, that natural sword maiden was too pitiful. She fought for humans for so long, but because of some strange experiment, her soul was completely destroyed. Lu Shihua's words were full of pity, but in fact, she didn't care much about this matter. A natural sword maiden was gone. What did it have to do with her? However, Lu Shihua's words caused a huge wave to rise in Ji Yuhan's heart. It was really like handing a pillow when one wanted to doze off. Ji Yuhan had just been worried about King Yu's sword ladybody, and now the sword ladybody had been handed to Ji Yuhan. However, Guhan felt that something was wrong. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Perhaps Yi Qing had already planned everything behind the scenes. Fortunately, Yi Qing was Ji Yuhan's wife. Otherwise, if Ji Yuhan was treated as an enemy by someone like Yi Qing who could predict the future, then Ji Yuhan might really be sold by someone else and still count the money for them. What other news? It was about the broken natural sword maiden. Shihua, what else did you find out? Guhan asked hurriedly. There's nothing else. However, the Sword Committee has decided to send people to supervise the burial of the unlucky natural sword maiden. They will melt her and let her return to the earth. After that, no one is allowed to mention this matter again. Lu Shihua shrugged. I suddenly feel that humans are hopeless. They caused the death of a natural sword maiden, and all they think about is how to hide it. They don't even have the courage to take responsibility. I despise them. When will the people they sent to supervise set off? Guhan clenched his fists. It seems like they'll set off tomorrow because the armored levitating train will return to Yuzhang City with the goods tomorrow. They'll be going back with them. I understand. Good disciple. Go and rest. Master still has something to do. After Guhan sent Lu Shihua, who felt that something was wrong, out, he immediately put on his helmet and entered the game again. The place where Guhan logged in was still King Yu's room. Usually, when Guhan went online, King Yu would stay in his room and wait. Sometimes, he would even sleep naked on the bed, tempting Guhan to do it on the spot. However, the room was empty now, not even King Yu's shadow could be seen. King Yu, come out, Guhan said to the empty room as if he was singing a one-man show. What's wrong? You're in a hurry. I don't have the ability to serve that thing of yours right now. King Yu's voice sounded in the room as if she was standing somewhere in the room, but he couldn't see her figure. Our chance is here. Guhan walked to the bed excitedly and said to the window, your body of the sword maiden has appeared. I will definitely free you from this damned soul state. Chapter 742. After coming out of the rise from the ground dungeon, King Yu was in a very strange state. After returning to the game world, King Yu's physical body disappeared, leaving only his soul around Guhan. Not only did the sword maiden's physical body disappear, even King Yu's sword form disappeared. King Yu was truly only left with a soul in the game. Guhan could only guess that when King Yu's soul left his physical body and flew into the Avachi sword, his physical body had already been destroyed in the dungeon. However, why did his physical body also disappear in the game world? This confused Guhan. Could it be that what happened in the dungeon could affect the game world? King Yu, there's another question I don't understand. That is, how should I bring your soul into the real world? Guhan said to the empty air, I remember Chinga saying that the answer to all questions can be found in the furnace of heaven and earth. So, King Yu, I want to ask you, can you find a way to leave the game while fusing with the Avachi sword in the furnace of heaven and earth? How could there be a way to leave the game during that process? I was only guided by Yi Qing's soul into the Avachi sword's body. Without Yi Qing's help, my soul would have been destroyed on the spot. King Yu said. Wait, you entered the Avachi sword under Qing Er's guidance. Guhan's eyes lit up. Then can you enter the real world under the guidance of the other sword maidens? How is that possible? I didn't go offline and fuse with the Avachi sword. Moreover, the other sword maidens didn't destroy their original bodies and exist in soul form. How can these two things be confused? King Yu said disdainfully. No, who said that the other sword maidens didn't go offline in soul form? They entered the game in the form of a soul, and then left the game in the form of a soul. This is actually the same as fusing with a sword maiden. Ji Yuhan clapped his hands. King Yu, wait a moment. I'll call the other sword maidens. With that, Guhan went offline. Not long after, Ji Yun, Yi Tian, and Juzi unwillingly went online. Ji Yun, you go first. Guhan explained the matter to Ji Yun in detail. Ji Yun was at a loss as she blinked her eyes and asked Guhan, Brother, I know how to go offline, but I don't know how to go offline with big sister King Yu. What should I do? I remember that big sister Yi Qing and my soul seemed to be connected by chains. She used her mind to touch me, and then my soul maintained a completely relaxed state. The two of us were connected. King Yu replied in a low voice without any confidence. It was obvious that she was also in a half-dazed state. Then let's try King Yu's method first. King Yu, stand in front of Little Yun. Then, Little Yun, try to use your divine sense to see if you can feel King Yu's soul. Ji Yuhan decided to try everything he could. Oh. Ji Yun obediently nodded, closed her eyes, and tried to sense King Yu's soul. Although this was a very serious matter, Ji Yun's expression looked like she was sitting on a toilet bowl, constipated for a few days, and couldn't poop even though she was trying her best. I feel it. I feel it. Suddenly, Ji Yun cried out excitedly, Big sister King Yu, did my will touch your soul? You touched my finger. With a smirk on his face, Yi Tian tapped Ji Yun's forehead forcefully. Ji Yun's forehead had just touched Yi Tian's finger. Stop messing around, it's your turn now. Guhan scolded. Yi Tian stuck out his tongue. No, I won't do such a stupid thing. It's like I've been constipated for 5 days and 5 nights. That's too stupid. Yi Tian, who didn't get along with Guhan, suddenly started to make a fuss again. He shouted and shouted, not willing to do as Guhan said no matter what. Who is it? Who touched me? Just as Guhan was about to teach Yi Tian a lesson, King Yu's soul suddenly cried out strangely. What's going on? King Yu, what's wrong? Guhan hurriedly asked. Just now, something touched me. It felt the same as in the dungeon. Just now, a soul did touch my soul. There's no mistake. King Yu shouted excitedly. At this point, Ju Zi, who had been silent all this while, suddenly started to shine with starlight. The starlight started from Ju's forehead and slowly extended forward. Then, the starlight seemed to have hit something. The top began to split into countless thin lines, drawing an outline in the air, and finally formed the appearance of a young girl. This was not the appearance of a normal girl. To be more precise, she looked like a drawing, a pencil sketch. If one looked closely, this drawing was clearly King Yu's appearance. Big sister King Yu, when did you go to the 2D world? Seeing the sketch of King Yu, Ji Yun chuckled and said mischievously. You're just 2D. Your whole family is 2D. King Yu scolded Ji Yun in displeasure. Big brother, your King Yu scolded you for coming from the 2D world. If you want to teach her a lesson, you might as well ignore her and sell her. Ji Yun immediately started to sow discord. Alright, stop messing around. This world is a 2D world to begin with. Guhan patted Ji Yun's head, then looked at the sketch of King Yu with a scrutinizing gaze. King Yu, is your soul connection successful? I think so, King Yu said uncertainly. Then, she looked at Juzi, as if asking for Juzi's opinion. I don't know, Juzi said expressionlessly. It seemed like she really didn't know. Juzi, log off immediately. Guhan first said this to Juzi, then said to King Yu, when Juzi logs off, King Yu, you must pay attention to the changes in your soul. If Juzi's soul makes any requests, you must be absolutely obedient and absolutely relaxed. Got it. King Yu nodded. In the next second, Juzi's body disappeared from the game, and the sketch of King Yu in the air also disappeared. King Yu. Are you still there? Guhan asked loudly, but he didn't get any reply. No reply was a good thing. Guhan didn't even have time to smile before he went offline with Ji Yun and Yi Tian. Yangjing City's core area, 87, Jiefeng Road, room 401, building 4. Guhan looked at the somewhat old envelope in his hand. At the same time, he kept comparing the map of Yangjing City, but he couldn't find Jiefeng Road written on the address. Guhan subconsciously touched the green jade ring on his finger. He didn't know if everyone remembered the origin of this ring. This was the ring that Guhan obtained from Yi Qing in the Hero's Start from Insignificance dungeon. What made Guhan feel strange and terrifying was that after returning to the real world, this green jade ring was actually sent from Yangjing City to Guhan. It was as if someone had seen through Guhan's experience. This envelope was the one that was sent to Guhan with the green jade ring. Yangjing City's core area, 87, Jiefeng Road, room 401, building 4 was also the address written on this envelope. At that time, Guhan didn't throw the envelope away. Instead, he hid it in his dimensional pocket. As expected, it came in handy at this time. In order to allow King Yu to be reborn in the game, he had to restart the worldly furnace. The amount of sovereign blood required to restart the worldly furnace was not something that Guhan could obtain in a short period of time. However, Yi Qing seemed to have prepared for this. She had prepared an IOU for Guhan, allowing Guhan to obtain at least 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood with the IOU. Although he didn't know if Yi Qing was telling the truth, finding the IOU was something that Guhan had to do. This was what Yi Qing had told Guhan. Qing has already told you the address of the IOU. You just need to go get it yourself. Guhan could guarantee that Yi Qing had never told him the address of the IOU in the Rise from the Ground dungeon. At that time, Guhan had wanted to ask Yi Qing about it. However, he suddenly recalled the green jade ring and the address written on the envelope containing the green jade ring. If there was an address that Yi Qing had told Ji Yuhan, it would only be this one. Therefore, Guhan made a prompt decision and bought a detailed map of Beijing City. He began to search around the entire core area of Beijing City in an attempt to find the street known as Liberation Road. The first thing Gu Han did was to see if the words Liberation Road were written on the map. However, it was a pity that there were countless road names on the map, but the words Liberation Road were nowhere to be found. Of course, this was also within Gu Han's expectations. This address could be an address from 700 years ago. The entire Yangjing city had gone through more than a dozen traffic reconstructions. The city planning had long been a world of difference from 700 years ago. It was difficult for the name of Liberation Road to continue. To give a simple example, who among the readers knew about the Ming dynasty? What was the name of the street in the city that he was in? Even if the name of the street had lasted for 700 years, there was no guarantee that this Liberation Road was the Liberation Road from 700 years ago. It was possible that the distance between the two was a few hundred kilometers. It seems that I have to find a way to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago to figure out the exact location of Liberation Road. Gu Han stuffed the map in his hand into his dimensional pocket and muttered to himself. However, it was easier said than done to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago. 700 years ago, the human network system had not yet been established. The recording and storage of information could only rely on traditional paper media. Therefore, it was impossible to find a map of Beijing City from 700 years ago on the internet. Gu Han also tried to get Lu Shihua to use his identity as the head of the Sword Garret in Yuzhong City to search for information in the central secret database. But what was frustrating was that the map of Yangjing City was not classified information at all, so there was no relevant information about Yangjing City in the database. There might be such a map in Yangjing's own database, but unfortunately, Lu Shihua's identity as the head of the Yuzhong Sword Garret was not as useful as an ordinary person in Yangjing in front of Yangjing's database. He was not even allowed to enter Yangjing's database. Fortunately, the map came to him on its own. Chapter 743. Zhu Qingquan, someone is looking for you. Zhu Qingquan saw his colleague looking at him mockingly, and he knew that something bad was about to happen. He didn't know if it was because of Zhu Qingquan's harmless appearance, but ever since he entered the Ministry of Transport, almost all the bad luck in the ministry was handed over to him. Everyone was used to letting Zhu Qingquan take the blame. If it wasn't for the fact that this was a job that everyone envied, Zhu Qingquan might have resigned already. Brother Wang, can you tell me what good thing is coming to me? Zhu Qingquan forced a smile and asked his colleague. How would I know if you ask me? Brother Wang chuckled. This person is now in the living room. Originally, he came directly to the minister, but seeing the minister's bad luck, he threw this matter to you without even meeting him. You should be more tolerant. Why don't you take responsibility for this? Zhu Qingquan cursed in his heart. However, Zhu Qingquan was still very curious. Who could make the minister so bad luck that he didn't even want to meet him? Zhu Qingquan rushed to the living room anxiously. As soon as he saw the person sitting on the sofa, Zhu Qingquan suddenly realized that it was this big boss. No wonder the minister didn't even want to meet him. This kind of big boss with a sword was the most difficult to serve. As the minister, dealing with this kind of thing was just asking to be humiliated. Sir Gu Han, didn't I tell you that you have 3 days? You don't have to be in such a hurry. Zhu Qingquan quickly put a cup of fragrant tea in front of Gu Han and said with a smile. It was hard to imagine that this was a civil servant of the Ministry of Transport. Under normal circumstances, which civil servant of the Ministry of Transport didn't have a good expression on their face, and their mouth didn't have a good word. They would try to delay the whole process, and if they could delay it for 4 days, they wouldn't delay it for 3 days. It was rare to see a civil servant like this who came to deliver tea with a smile. Those who didn't know the situation would think that this person had something on the Ministry of Transport. They wouldn't have thought that Gu Han was a criminal suspect in a serious speeding case. May I know why Mr. Gu Han is here? Zhu Qingquan asked carefully. You must be joking. Didn't you ask me to come? I should be the one asking you what you want me to do. Gu Han looked at Zhu Qingquan in confusion. Slap. If he wasn't facing Gu Han, Zhu Qingquan would have slapped himself. He seriously wondered if his brain was filled with shit. That was why he was possessed by a ghost and asked Guhan why he was here. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep well last night. Zhu Qingquan was telling the truth. He really didn't sleep well last night. The thing is, did you drive a Yang Huang 3008 Super Maglev sports car from Yangjing City's 5th Ring Road to the core area between 6:30 p.m. and 6:55 p.m. on October 21st? Zhu Qingquan asked worriedly. He was worried that what if Guhan refused to admit it? What if he quarreled with her and left the Ministry of Transport? What if the minister forced him to take responsibility for this matter? Zhu Qingquan's mind was filled with countless conjectures, and every conjecture ended with his own unfortunate figure. That's right. That person was me. Guhan's answer made Zhu Qingquan let out a long sigh of relief. Since the other party had voluntarily admitted it, this matter could be considered half-settled. Then, Sir Guhan, can you cooperate with us and accept a simple punishment? Speaking up to this point, Zhu Qingquan's heart was in his throat again. He was afraid that Guhan would refuse to accept any punishment. No problem. I did indeed race on the street. The mistake was made by me, and I should accept the punishment. Guhan smiled and nodded. This made Zhu Qingquan feel more at ease. Please take a look. Are these conditions okay? Do you have any objections? Zhu Qingquan carefully handed a document to Guhan. This document simply listed the punishment that Guhan would receive. Sir, please take a look. If you feel that there's anything wrong with it, or if the amount is too high, we can amend it at any time. We can change it at any time, and we can discuss it well. Zhu Qingquan's words had completely embarrassed the government. Since when was it easy to discuss the fines of the traffic department? Was there such a government in this world? Guhan looked at the punishment on the document and was shocked. It was not that the conditions of the punishment were too high, but too low. It was so low that Guhan felt a little embarrassed. First of all, this document did not have any detention type of punishment. It only required Guhan to sign an apology and pay a fine of 10,000 renminbi. This matter would end just like that. For a sword wielder, what kind of punishment was 10,000 renminbi? It was just the money for a meal. This 10,000 renminbi was probably only an administrative fine. Guhan had damaged a lot of public property on the way here, so it was reasonable to say that he should also pay a lot of money. However, the punishment notice did not mention a word about this punishment. Obviously, this loss was silently borne by the traffic department themselves. Zhu Qingquan carefully observed Guhan's expression. He was afraid that the other party was dissatisfied with the punishment conditions of the traffic department. According to the method that the department head had instructed him yesterday, as long as the other party was willing to admit his mistake and pay a small fine, this matter would be considered over. Even the Yang Huang 3008 that caused the accident could be returned to the other party. Speaking of the Yang Huang 3008, Zhu Qingquan felt a headache coming on. The Yang Huang 3008 had crashed through many checkpoints along the way, destroying many police cars and buses. It had also suffered heavy injuries, and the entire roof had been torn off. In order to resolve this matter as soon as possible, the traffic department even used their own money to repair the Yang Huang 3008. The total repair cost was more than 10 million renminbi, which was 1,000 times the amount of the fine. Unlike before the apocalypse, when every department had their own private coffers, at this time, the budgets of all the government departments were in the hands of the highest level AI. Every department expenditure had to go through the approval of the highest level AI. Therefore, this 10 million renminbi repair cost could not be paid with the public funds of the traffic department. Zhu Qingquan heard that from next month onwards, all the civil servants of the traffic department would be deducted 1,000 renminbi from their salaries, until the 10 million renminbi was made up. Inside and outside of the Yangjing City's traffic department, there were only about 1,000 people. This would take a full 10 months to make up for it. This 1,000 renminbi might not be much to the big shots, but for Zhu Qingquan, who did not earn much in the first place, it almost made him cry blood. Not good. Not good. Guhan threw the punishment document on the table and said while shaking his head. Hearing Guhan say this, Zhu Qingquan was so anxious that he was about to cry. Sir Guhan, if you think the fine is too high, we can discuss it again. Otherwise, you can just pay 5,000 renminbi. Sir, you have to understand us. The council has been forcing us to give a result, and we dare not take a single cent from you. Hey, this is not a matter of money. Guhan shook his head. Zhu Qingquan was stunned for a moment, and suddenly had a look of realization. This Guhan definitely did not want to sign the letter of apology. For a sword-bearer, what was 10,000 renminbi? The most important thing was his own face. Signing the letter of apology was equivalent to losing a lot of face. This sword-bearer, who had once been the master of the Yuzhong Sword Pavilion, definitely did not want to lose face. If possible, Zhu Qingquan did not want this stupid letter of apology. It was not like he could eat it. But there was no other way. The sword-bearer wanted face, and so did the council. Without this letter of apology, the council and the Ministry of Transport would all be embarrassed, and this matter would not be resolved. Zhu Qingquan had no choice but to plead with Guhan again and persuade him to sign the letter of apology. Guhan has grown up, and the Ministry of Transport is really in trouble. The council is in charge, and the people are complaining. Our Weibo has tens of thousands of comments every day, saying that the Ministry of Transport only cares about fines and doesn't care about traffic. How would they know the pain of the Ministry of Transport? Every one of us is living like a dog. Zhu Qingquan began to make a long speech. As he spoke, a few drops of tears flowed from the corner of his eyes. Everything had been fine, but now it had become a complaining session. You don't have to say any more. Let me ask you, after I sign this letter of apology, what will you do with it? Will it be made public? Guhan asked, interrupting Zhu Qingquan's tearful complaint. No. Absolutely not. Zhu Qingquan immediately patted his chest and promised, this is what we will use to explain to the higher-ups. We promise that it will never be made public. I dare to guarantee with my job and personal dignity that this is just used to fool the higher-up. I see. It seems that I can't sign this letter of apology, Guhan said resolutely. In an instant, Zhu Qingquan was speechless, and he was completely stunned. Zhu Qingquan's eyes had lost all the light, and there was only darkness left, as if the whole world had collapsed. I'd better resign and go home to sell sweet potatoes. Zhu Qingquan thought silently, and was ready to get up and leave. If this letter of apology is not made public, how can I express my apology? How can I reflect the dignity of the law? How can I learn from past mistakes and deter people who want to race in Yangjing City in the future? Guhan said righteously, and Zhu Qingquan, who was just about to stand up and leave, was so scared that he sat back down again. What is this situation? What does this sword-bearer, Guhan, want to say? Why don't I seem to understand a word? Before Zhu Qingquan could figure out what happened, he heard Guhan say again, this letter of apology must not be made public. It must be published and let everyone see it. Only then can it serve as a warning to future generations. So, I decided that I will publish an apology letter on the internet, newspapers, and TV, expressing my apology for the racing incident, and warning the future generations to never make this kind of mistake like me. Section Chief Zhu, do you think I can deal with it this way? After that, Guhan looked at Zhu Qingquan with a smile and asked. Yes, yes. Zhu Qingquan could really do it this time. Chapter 744. There's also the issue of the fine. The amount is too little. How can 10,000 be enough? I think it should be at least 1 million renminbi, otherwise, how can we learn from past mistakes to avoid future mistakes? Guhan looked at the punishment document and said, yes, yes. Zhu Qingquan, who was still in a state of confusion, could only reply in a low voice. There's also the issue of compensation for damage to public facilities. Why isn't it written on this list? I remember that I hit and damaged 32 maglev police cars, 46 maglev buses, 120 street lamps, and some other things that I can't remember. How much do I have to pay? Yes, since you don't have the statistics, I'll give you a number. I think it's 10 million yuan. Do you think it's enough for the compensation? Guhan waved his hand, And 10 million yuan was sent out. Yes, yes, and my Yang Huang 3008 Super Maglev flying car. That's the car that caused the accident. How can you give it back to me? They should detain that super hover flying car in the Ministry of Transportation forever. In the future, when there's a Spectrum Technique Publicity Week, Traffic Safety Week, we can bring this car out for display during the Public Travel Week to warn those who intend to break the law. We can tell them that Yangjing City does not allow car racing, and violators will have their tools confiscated. Section Chief Ju, do you think this is okay? Yes, yes. Ju Qingquan was still immersed in his yes world until Guhan shook his body and handed a new revised traffic accident handling opinion to Ju Qingquan. Ju Qingquan woke up from his own world. Section Chief Ju, please see if you can handle it according to the suggestions in this letter. Ju Qingquan received the new letter in a daze. He almost jumped out of his chair after reading it. When he finished reading the entire letter, he was so excited that he couldn't even speak. After the revision, the traffic proposal was completely different from the original one. Not only did Guhan have to publish a letter of apology on the internet, newspapers, and television, he also had to pay a 1 million RMB administrative fine and 10 million RMB compensation for the damage to public property. He also had to leave a large number of Yang Huang 3008 in the Ministry of Transport as a warning to future generations. What else could Ju Qingquan say when he saw such a resolution? This made the Ministry of Transport, which had been prepared to swallow this huge loss, suddenly turn around. Not only did they gain face, but they also received an additional income of nearly 80 million yuan for no reason. If the old minister who resigned a few days ago knew that things would turn out like this, he would probably vomit blood and die at home. For Ju Qingquan, if this letter was really finalized, then he, Ju Qingquan, would become the first hero of the Ministry of Transportation. His status in the Ministry of Transportation would instantly rise. Everyone had to remember Ju Qingquan's kindness. Even the head of the Ministry of Transportation owed Ju Qingquan. In the assessment that would take place a few months later, his position would definitely be moved up. But was there really such a good thing in the world? Ju Qingquan couldn't believe it. Lord Guhan, is what you wrote in this letter true? If there's no problem, I'll hand it over to our minister to make a new decision, Ju Qingquan said urgently. He couldn't wait to take the written opinion away to prevent Guhan from going back on his word. Wait. Guhan pressed his hand on the written opinion and said with a smile, actually, I have a small favor that I hope Chief Ju can help me with. Sure enough. There was no free lunch in this world. This Guhan really wanted him to do something to make a deal. But what exactly did Guhan want him to do? Would it be a crime that would endanger the entire Ministry of Transportation? Or a conspiracy that was very dangerous and might even put his future and life on the line? Thinking of this, Ju Qingquan was completely at a loss. He didn't know if he should agree to the deal with the devil Guhan. It's not a difficult thing. I like to collect some old maps. This time I came to Yangjing City, I want to collect all the city maps of Yangjing City since its founding. But you also know that I'm from Yuzhang City. Your Yangjing City sword-bearer doesn't seem to think highly of me and is unwilling to fulfill my small wish. There's no other way, I can only ask Chief Ju to help me with this small favor. I guarantee that as long as Section Chief Ju can help me get a map of Yangjing City that has been mapped and revised every year since the founding of Yangjing City, I will sign this letter of settlement and guarantee that it will be completed without any discount. I can post the letter of apology on the internet in front of you and send it to the newspapers and television stations. All the money as compensation will also be paid in full without delay. Guhan's request made Ju Qingquan fall into silence. It wasn't that he thought Guhan's conditions were too much. On the contrary, Guhan's conditions were too small. It was so small that Ju Qingquan felt a little guilty. It would be extremely difficult for others to get their hands on these maps of Yangjing City. But for the staff of the Ministry of Transportation, it couldn't be any easier. The information wasn't even classified, so it was impossible for it to cause any harm to Yangjing City. Therefore, these maps were all stored in the Ministry of Transportation's public server. Any member of the Ministry of Transportation could freely download them without any problems. Zhu Qing felt that he was silent because he couldn't figure out if Guhan's words were true or not. Was he really just doing this for his own desire to collect? Zhu Qingquan was afraid that Guhan's deal had some malicious intentions. Wasn't this how it was portrayed on TV? A seemingly insignificant piece of information could cause a major change in the entire world. If things went wrong, Zhu Qingquan might even become a sinner in history. F***ck. What does being a sinner in history have to do with me? I can't even keep my rice bowl, why would I care about being a sinner in history? Zhu Qingquan made up his mind and nodded at Guhan. No problem, Sir Guhan, please wait here for a moment. I will copy all the information over now. Thank you. Ji Yuhan's lips curled up slightly. A few hours later, an apology letter signed by Guhan was posted on some platforms. However, these apology letters were only posted in some inconspicuous corners, such as in the middle of a newspaper advertisement, on the bottom of a TV station screen, or in an ordinary thread on an online forum. Therefore, this apology letter didn't cause any waves. No one knew that the previous head of the Sword Tower in Yuzhang City had actually posted such an apology letter. It wasn't until many years later, when Guhan's fame spread all over the world, that this apology letter was unearthed by a tabloid reporter and made public, causing an uproar. Everyone who saw this apology letter praised Guhan as a man of noble character, a man who dared to admit his mistakes, and the greatest person of this era. As a result, this apology letter that originally admitted his mistakes became a heroic deed of Guhan to prove his noble character. Things in the world were just that ridiculous. Zhu Qingquan indeed benefited from this misfortune. He was promoted one rank. Later, it was said that his luck was off the charts and his career was incomparably successful. In the end, he became a standing member of the Yangjing City Council and a great figure in Yangjing City. There was a special mapping department in Yangjing City's Ministry of Transportation. Every year, they would draw a map of Yangjing City and save it. This precious information fell into Guhan's hands so easily. Starting from the year 2068, when Yangjing City was founded, the map of Yangjing City was in Guhan's hands every year. Through these maps, Guhan could see the vicissitudes and changes of Yangjing City in the past 1,000 years, as well as the huge development. Ji Yuhan started his search from the year Yi Qing ascended to the throne, and sure enough, he found a road called Liberation Road in the core area of Yangjing City. But just 10 years later, the core area of Yangjing City changed its name, and the original name of Liberation Road was changed to another road a few kilometers away. Just 2 years later, the name of the road changed again, and it became another road that was quite a distance away. After that, the location of Liberation Road never changed again. It was not until more than 60 years later that Liberation Road was completely removed. From then on, there was no road named Liberation Road in Yangjing City. Therefore, it was obvious that the Liberation Road Guhan was looking for was definitely one of the 3 Liberation Roads. Then the question became, which one was the true path to liberation? Ji Yuhan's first goal was to temporarily set the last path of liberation. The reason was very simple. During the time Yi Qing was alive, the last Liberation Road had existed for the longest time, a full 60 years, so the possibility of the last Liberation Road was naturally the highest. Compared to the current map, the last Liberation Road corresponded to a road called Hongru Road. From the name, it was obvious that this road was named after Hongru Jendi. This was also the basic rule for naming roads in all cities. Every time a Jendi was born in their city, they would also choose a road in the core area to be named after this Jendi to show respect for Jendi. And if this Jendi's contribution was great enough that all Jendi felt ashamed of themselves, then all 8 major cities would have a road named after this Jendi. For example, Zhetian Jendi, or Kunzu. The most recent Jendi to achieve this was Jiyujin Jendi. According to the map, 700 years ago, Liberation Road was a small road, and both sides of the road were densely packed with residential buildings. But now, Hongru Road had become a commercial street, and there were all kinds of shops on both sides of the road. After a lot of effort, Guhan finally found the location of number 87 on the old map. However, the original residential building had disappeared, and in its place was a Chanel pork restaurant. Guhan and Chanel were really fated. Chapter 745. Waiter, give me 100 kilograms of red braised meat first. Guhan threw Qingpin, who was sitting in the infant pouch on his chest, onto the table. Before Qingpin could ask for meat, Guhan took the initiative to help Qingpin get 100 kilograms of red braised meat. This time, only Qingpin went out with Guhan. Jiu Yun was still sleeping at home. Ju's situation was very special. She couldn't move and could only stay at home. Yi Tian went out to find wine early in the morning. Guhan didn't want to disturb her mood, so only Qingpin followed Guhan at this time. Qingpin likes Guhan the most. Come, give me a kiss. Qingpin jumped onto Guhan's shoulder from the table and gave a big kiss to Guhan's face. She even licked Guhan's ear with her little tongue, making Guhan's whole body tremble. Qingpin was ignorant, so she didn't know. When Guhan and King Yu carried out some kind of indescribable movement, once King Yu was at a disadvantage and was tortured by Guhan to the point that he wanted to die, King Yu only needed to lick Guhan's ear desperately. King Yu only needed to lick the solid cold's ear with all his might, and the solid cold's durability would instantly drop by around 3 times. In just a short while, that damned thing would be shot out. King Yu had never failed this move. Don't lick my place in the future. Guhan knocked Qingpin's head hard, then pinched Qingpin's cheek and warned Qingpin with a red face. Okay. I hate Guhan the most. Qingpin and Guhan played for a while, then the first plate of red braised meat was served. Qingpin immediately threw Guhan to the back of his mind and began to gorge himself on his delicacies. Who was Guhan? He couldn't remember. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning, which wasn't mealtime, so the entire Chanel seemed very empty. There were only 2 customers. One was sitting in the west corner eating quietly, and the other was Qingpin, who was wolfing down his food at the table. Guhan casually ate a few mouthfuls of meat and pretended to be bored as he chatted with a waitress standing beside him. It was already quite boring at this time, and Guhan had ordered 100 catties of pork in one go. It was obvious that he was a rich man. Therefore, this beautiful waitress was happy to chat with Guhan. Soon, Guhan got a lot of information out of her. First of all, this Chanel had a very long history. It was the first branch of the Chanel chain, which was also the second branch. It had a history of more than 280 years, and could be considered one of the 3 oldest shops on the entire street. The turnover of staff in this branch was very fast. There were no more than 2 employees who were older than him, and neither of them had stayed here for more than 5 years. Moreover, this branch had just been renovated 3 years ago, and all the decorations in the shop had been changed. Moreover, in order to reinstall the underground pipes, the entire ground had been excavated. When he heard this, Guhan felt that this shop couldn't be the place where the loan receipt was hidden. First, because there wasn't anyone who stayed here for a long time, so there couldn't be someone who received Zhe Tianzhendi's order and waited for more than 700 years to send that letter to him. Second, since this shop was so thoroughly renovated, it was obvious that the loan receipt couldn't be hidden in the shop. Otherwise, it would have been discovered long ago, and it wouldn't have fallen into Guhan's hands. After understanding this, Guhan decided to wait for Qingpin to finish his 100 catties of red braised pork before looking at the other 2 roads. The second Jiefeng Road was the Jiefeng Road that appeared first. This Jiefeng Road had always been called Jiefeng Road before Zhe Tianzhendi ascended to the throne, so it was obviously the second most suspicious. Contrary to the previous Jiefeng Road, number 87, of Jiefeng Road 700 years ago was a shop, but 700 years later, number 87, of Jiefeng Road had become a residential building. Could the loan receipt be hidden in someone's house? Guhan's heart skipped a beat, and he walked around the building. This residential building had some history. Guhan saw a nameplate by the side of the road. This nameplate was marked with the year 2856, which proved that this building was at least built before 2856. The floor of this building was not high, only about 6 floors. This was impossible outside the core area, because the residential buildings outside the core area had at least 100 stories in order to accommodate more people. Only the residential buildings in the core area were generally not tall, and the highest was no more than 10 stories. The reason for this was that these residential buildings were actually the sword bearers and their families. The sword-bearers needed a good living environment, and the higher the floor, the worse the living environment would become. In order to let the sword-bearers live as comfortably as possible, the sword-bearers' residential buildings in the core area of every base would be limited to less than 10 stories. This was both good and bad for Guhan. The good was that there were fewer residents in the building, so it was naturally easier to search. Otherwise, a residential building with more than 100 stories and more than 400 households would be impossible for Guhan to find a complete residential building even if he searched for 10 days and 10 nights. The bad was naturally that the difficulty of communication would greatly increase. When facing ordinary residents, as long as Guhan revealed his identity as a sword-bearer, he believed that no one would dare to refuse Guhan's search. However, it was different for the sword-bearers. Who would be willing to let an outsider search their home? When faced with Guhan's request, these sword-bearers would naturally refuse without hesitation. Therefore, if he wanted to find out which household might have the loan slip, Guhan had to use some clever methods, such as the two old aunties who were enjoying the shade under a small tree in front of the building. "Hello, big sister. May I ask if Mr. Li Gang's family lives here?" Guhan asked the two aunties with a smile. "How can you say that, kid? I'm not a big sister, I'm almost 70 years old." Although the two aunties scolded him, they still didn't know how to speak, but their cheerful smiles deeply betrayed them. Obviously, the words big sister were very useful to them. "Young man, who did you say you were looking for?" "We don't have a neighbor called Li Gang in this building," one of the aunties said with a smile. "Really? I seem to remember that Brother Li said that he lives here. Is it number 87 or number 78? Guhan touched his head honestly and said with a puzzled face. Of course, there wouldn't be a person named Li Gang here, because this name was just made up by Guhan. "Young man, you must have heard the wrong street name. I've lived here all my life, and there is no one named Li Gang on this whole street." One of the aunties patted her drooping chest and said, "Then I'm sorry to bother you sisters." Guhan smiled honestly again and took out 2 small boxes from his dimensional pocket and handed them to the two aunties and sisters. "These are the 2 boxes of facial masks I won a few days ago. I don't need them, so I'll give them to you 2 sisters as an apology." "Yo, how can I accept this? It's even the Wei Long brand of facial masks. I heard that a box can be sold for thousands of yuan on the market." The two aunties said they were sorry, but their hands quickly put away the 2 boxes of facial masks. One of the aunties even looked at the dimensional pocket in Guhan's hand that was shining. But don't get me wrong, these aunties didn't want to steal Guhan's dimensional pocket, but they were interested in Guhan's identity as a sword-bearer. "Young man, why are you looking for Li Gang? Why don't you tell us about it?" A middle-aged woman asked curiously. "It's like this. Li Gang is a friend I met a few days ago. He said that he has a sister who is very beautiful and wants to introduce her to me, so I came to look for him." Speaking of this, Guhan's face showed 2 groups of shy blushes, and he looked like a shy and honest young man. "I was wondering what it was for. It turned out to be a blind date." The 2 aunties laughed, and one of them took one of Guhan's hands and said with a smile, "Young man, you don't have to see Li Gang. Let me tell you, if there are any outstanding beauties, they would have long been snatched away by others. Why would they introduce you to someone they just met? Young man, listen to me, if you really want to know a girl, Sister Wang will introduce you to her. I, Sister Wang, have lived here since I was born. I know all the girls on this street, and I know each and every one of them. I promise to introduce you to a good girl who is gentle, virtuous, and virtuous." Sister Wang turned into a passionate matchmaker in the blink of an eye. "Tell me, what good girls are there around here?" "Oh yes, my family is a family of sword-bearers. My ancestors have produced more than a dozen sword-bearers. So there is an ancestral teaching in my family that I have to find a family of sword-bearers. Aunties, do you know? Is there a family of sword-bearers that has been living here?" Guhan asked with a smile. At first glance, Guhan's request for a blind date sounded a bit unreasonable, full of discrimination and a feeling of matching. But in fact, most of the family of sword-bearers had such a request. Although there was no scientific conclusion, according to the observation of sword-bearers over the years, The marriage between sword-bearers could indeed increase the probability of producing a sword-bearer in the future. In order to ensure that their own family could continue to have a sword-bearer, the family of sword-bearers would all marry other sword-bearer families. Once a young man or woman in a family expressed dissatisfaction with this tradition and did not abide by it, it could be interpreted as a love story of Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai in this era. The rules in Yangjing City and Yuzhong City were the same. When someone in the family became a sword-bearer, he could bring the whole family to live in the core area. However, if the family didn't have a new sword-bearer within 3 generations, then the family would be banished to the second ring. Therefore, if one wanted to live in the core area, they would have to have a new sword-bearer every 3 generations. Gu Han set up such an identity for himself so that he could find out from the mouths of these aunties which families had been living in this building. These families must be the most likely to have the loan receipt. Chapter 746. With the enthusiastic help of these 2 aunties, Gu Han successfully obtained a lot of information. For example, there weren't many swordsman families that had been passed down for more than 10 generations, only 2 at most. One of them was said to have already declined, and once the current family head died, the family would immediately move out of the core area. The other family was bustling, and 2 brothers had become swordsmen at the same time. They were famous in the entire street, and everyone wanted to marry their daughters into them. In summary, the 2 aunties advised Gu Han not to marry the daughter of the second family. With the 2 swordsman brothers, he would definitely be able to live a good life. On the surface, Gu Han nodded with a smile, but in reality, he excluded the 2 swordsman brothers. This was because the 2 swordsman brothers were extremely greedy and lustful, and it was said that they had already occupied more than 10 beautiful girls, taking all of them as their concubines. However, the 2 swordsman brothers had gone through legal procedures, and the concubines were also willing to be with the 2 brothers, so Gu Han couldn't be bothered to care about these things. However, with the 2 brothers' greedy and lustful personalities, it was impossible for them to protect the treasure that Yi Qing had left for him. Not to mention the preciousness of the promissory note, even the jade ring that Yi Qing had left behind was extremely rare. With such a precious item in the hands of the 2 brothers, Gu Han didn't believe that the 2 brothers would be able to resist the temptation, and it was even more impossible for them to send him the precious jade ring. Therefore, after bidding farewell to the 2 unwilling aunties, Gu Han directly went to the door of the swordsman family that was said to be moving out of the core area. Knock, knock. Gu Han knocked 3 times, but no one answered. However, the door opened directly, and it turned out that the door had not been closed at all. As he walked into the room, a pungent smell assaulted his nostrils. This was a very strange smell, like bitter gourd, and there was even a hint of sourness in it. Looking towards the source of the smell, he discovered that there was a small stove burning in the living room, and there was a teapot on top of the stove. However, this utensil was different from the teapot. The body of the teapot was much higher and wider than the teapot. It was a utensil that Gu Han had never seen before. Interesting. Gu Han quietly walked forward, wanting to take a closer look at the utensil, but he suddenly heard a tender voice behind him, "Don't touch my grandfather's medicine." "Who are you?" Gu Han turned his head and saw a 7 or 8-year-old child with pigtails looking at him with a pair of big watery eyes. "You're saying that this pot is boiling medicine?" Gu Han sniffed the bitter smell in the air again. "How come I've never heard of such medicine?" Grandpa said it's called Chinese medicine. It's a treasure that has been passed down from ancient times to the present. You people cut your own bodies every day. Sooner or later, you won't even know how you died. The child unceremoniously ridiculed Gu Han, then ran over and pushed Gu Han away from the medicine stove. "You baddies, get out of here. My grandfather isn't dead yet, and this is still my home." It turned out that this child had thought of Gu Han as a government worker who had chased them out of the core region. It was no wonder that his attitude towards Gu Han was so disgusted and unfriendly. However, Gu Han had not expected that this unremarkable teapot would actually contain Chinese medicine. This was a treasure that had been lost for 1,000 years. Gu Han had long heard of the power of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine could cure many diseases that even the current medical technology, which was like black technology, could not. It could even bring the dead back to life. It was a legendary and incomparably powerful medical system. Unfortunately, during the apocalypse, most Chinese medicine had died in that catastrophe. The remaining bit of Chinese medicine had also been lost during the cultural apocalypse. Although later generations had the intention to restore Chinese medicine through some clues, unfortunately, they had never been able to find the method. Thus, Chinese medicine had become a mythical existence, only heard of in name but not in reality. This had become one of the biggest problems since ancient times. A book related to Chinese medicine could easily sell for tens of millions of yuan, which showed how rare and precious Chinese medicine was. Unexpectedly, Guhan could see the legendary Chinese medicine in this small room. This made Guhan even more convinced that the old man in this room was definitely not simple. It was very likely that he was the person he was looking for. "Little boy, you've misunderstood. I'm not here to chase you away. I'm here to look for something," Guhan replied honestly. "Look for something? Don't lie to me just because I'm a child. My house is already bare, how could there be anything for you to look for?" The child shouted, then immediately realized that something was wrong. "What nonsense are you talking about? This is my house. Why are you looking for something in my house? Little boy." Guhan suddenly raised his voice, making it loud enough for the people in the room to hear clearly. "I received a letter. It was the owner of the letter who told me that there was something I wanted here." "What are you talking about? Which bastard wrote to you to look for something in our house? We don't have what you want at all. You'd better get out of here now." The child put his hands on Guhan's waist, trying hard to push Guhan away from his house. Unfortunately, Guhan's body technique had already surpassed the level of being one with the horse. This child's strength could not push him away at all. "Little Hai. That's our family's distinguished guest. Cough, cough. Don't be rude. Cough, cough. Hurry up and invite the distinguished guest in." An old voice came from the room and said to Little Hai. The child could only helplessly stick out his tongue, tilted his head and pointed to the direction of the door to Guhan's room. "Since Grandpa called you and said that you're a distinguished guest, then go in." Guhan pushed open the door of Grandpa's room. An even more strange smell rushed into Guhan's nose. Unlike the smell of Chinese medicine that Guhan could not smell before, this smell had been smelled by Guhan many times. This was the smell of death. Once this smell appeared on a person's body, it meant that this person was not far from death. This was not the smell of injury and death, but the smell of a person's lifespan coming to an end. All the vitality in the body had been completely cut off. This old man was already dead. Unlike the four bare walls in the living room, the old man's room was filled with all kinds of things. On the wall was a big picture of the yin-yang fish of Tai Chi, and around the yin-yang fish was placed the 8 trigrams. In the corner of the room, there was a statue of a deity respectfully worshipped. In front of the statue of the deity was an incense burner with 3 sticks of sandalwood. Around the incense burner were all kinds of offerings, and there was even a piece of expensive natural pork. This person's house was bare to this extent, but he still used such rich offerings to worship a statue of the deity. From this, it could be seen how devout this old man's faith was. Guhan carefully looked at the statue of the deity, and found it unexpectedly familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. His gaze moved away from the statue of the deity, and on the other side of the room, there was a huge bookcase. On the bookcase, there were all kinds of books neatly arranged. These books were all in an ancient thread-bound style, a style that only existed in the Middle Ages. Although there were many books like this now, from the mottled marks on the bookcase, it was very likely that these books were all authentic, left behind from the era before the Great Destruction. This was an incredible amount of wealth. If these books were all authentic, then any one of them could easily be sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions at an auction. Guhan couldn't help but walk closer, wanting to see if these books were real or fake. But before Guhan could take a few steps forward, Little Hai blocked in front of Guhan, shaking his head and saying, "I won't let you look at my family's things. You bad person must have been tempted to steal my family's books and sell them. I definitely won't let you touch my family's things." "Little Hai, how dare you?" His grandfather, who was lying on the sickbed, suddenly roared, scaring Little Hai into kneeling on the ground. Little Hai walked to his grandfather's bedside and cried, "Grandpa, please don't be angry. It's all Little Hai's fault. Please don't be angry, please don't be angry. This is a good child." He knows that every time his grandfather gets angry, he is one step closer to the king of hell. Guhan looked at the child approvingly, then once again approached the bookcase. Guhan found that these books were very well organized. Although there were no titles written on the middle of the books, there was a small slip of paper at the bottom of each book, on which was written the name of the book. Guhan glanced at it and saw the labels Tao Te Ching, Nanhua True Scripture, Profound Penetration True Scripture, Rushing Void True Scripture, Yellow Court Scripture, Jade Emperor Scripture, Nine Cauldrons Divine Pill Scripture, All True Saints Divine Embryo Scripture, Heavenly Pure Golden Liquid Divine Pill Scripture, Yellow Emperor's Inner Scripture, and so on. Are these all authentic? Even with Guhan's temperament, when he saw the names of these books, he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. These books were extremely precious treasures to humans. Since the great cultural collapse, these books could no longer be found. It was impossible for future generations to know even a word in them. It had been 800 years, these books had disappeared for 800 years. If people knew that these Daoist classics still existed in the world in the form of ancient books, perhaps even Jendi couldn't help but take these Daoist classics into his own collection. Guhan roughly glanced at it again and found that there were more than 300 different labels here. If all the Daoist classics marked by these labels were preserved here, then almost 90% of the Daoist classics were here. Humans could almost declare that one of the most mysterious cultures in China since ancient times, Taoism, could be completely resurrected. Such precious things. Why did you hide them here? If you had given them to humans earlier, then we humans would have been able to understand the thoughts of our ancestors, and even find a way to eliminate Yuan Ku. Seeing this, Guhan couldn't help but ask the old man lying on the bed with some excitement. The heavenly Tao is heartless, and the people have no self. The calamity of humanity has not ended, and it is not time for these things to come into being. Cough cough. The old man said with a weak voice, "But today, my Wudong lineage can finally be free." Chapter 747. This old man actually said that he was a descendant of Wudong. When Guhan heard these words, he instantly thought of the unfinished story of the Wudong Pinnacle Dungeon. The survivors of Wudong Mountain were all rescued by the immortal sword wielder back to Yangjing City. Could it be that this old man was a descendant of those survivors? If that was the case, then these vast and boundless Daoist scriptures could be explained. These books should be treasures brought down from Wudong Mountain by the descendants of Wudong, and had always been in the hands of the descendants of Wudong. Grandpa, what nonsense are you talking about? What relationship do we have with Wudong Mountain? How are we descendants of Wudong? Is your illness worsening again? The little brat said hurriedly, trying to cover up the matter of the descendants of Wudong. Little Hai, there is nothing to hide in front of this lord. We have to tell the truth to make up for the mistake left by our ancestors. The old man coughed violently a few more times, scaring Little Hai into kneeling beside the old man, repeatedly saying yes. Lord, this old man has waited for more than 60 years, and finally, you have arrived. The sins of our Wu-Tang lineage for generations can finally be put to an end on this day. Although the old man's face was full of illness, he could not suppress the smile on his face. Clearly, the happiness in his heart had surpassed the pain in his body. What is going on? Are you really the descendants of Wudong Mountain? Guhan asked. So you already know about Wudong Mountain. That old man will not hide it from you. This old man is the 39th generation descendant of Wudong Zhenwu, the 58th generation leader of Wudong. When the old man spoke of the identity of the current leader of Wudong, his expression became very strange. It was unclear whether it was an expression of happiness or regret. To think that Wudong sect still exists in this world. He nodded. What about the others? I remember that there were hundreds of Wudong sect members who escaped back to Yangjing City. What about the others? Where did their descendants go? Descendants. The old man's expression became even more pained. There are no descendants. The entire Wudang sect is only left with the two of us. Otherwise, the position of Wudang sect leader would not have been handed to an old man like me, who has no talent at all. What is going on? Could it be that the descendants of Wudang encountered many more disasters later on? How could there be only the two of you left? Guhan asked, puzzled. My lord is wise. We have indeed suffered a calamity. However, this tribulation does not come from outsiders, but from our own heart. After saying this, the old man fell silent for a long time. The stiff aura on his face became even more intense. Guhan estimated that in less than 10 minutes, this old man would pass away. What calamity will come from your heart? Guhan continued to ask. It's greed. The old man stretched out his hand and ordered Little C, go get Grandpa's brocade box. Grandpa? Which box are you talking about? The child even winked at his grandfather as he spoke, but it did not escape Guhan's eyes. Bastard. Apart from the one and only brocade box that Grandpa has, how could he have a second brocade box? The old man coughed violently a few more times. Stinking brat, if you don't want to anger your grandfather to death, then give me that brocade box. Yes. Only then did the child helplessly get up and walk to the side of the bookshelf. He gently pressed a certain spot, and the entire bookshelf began to move to the sides, revealing a small cabinet in the middle of the bookshelf. From the cabinet, he suddenly took out a brocade box. Grandpa, it's here. Little C placed the brocade box in front of his grandfather. The old man struggled to stretch out his bony, withered hand from under the blanket and slowly opened the brocade box. From inside, he took out a pure white letter and handed it to Guhan. Guhan took the letter and saw that at the center of the top of the letter were the words IOU. IOU today, I borrowed 3-6 revolutions immortal pills from the Wudang sect. In the future, I will definitely repay you tenfold. Whether it is 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. If there is a descendant who holds a IOU and asks for repayment from me or my descendants must do their best to repay it. Not a single word of refusal is allowed. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon, April 15, 2286. After reading the words on the IOU, Guhan's heart was filled with excitement. Although there were less than 100 words on the IOU, it revealed a lot of shocking information. First, the IOU was written by Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon was the 7th head of the Liunyan family, and also the first female head of the Liunyan family. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was extremely high. Before the age of 35, she had already become a peak immortal sword wielder. She was only one step away from becoming an emperor sword wielder. It was said that at the time, all the sword wielder naturally believed that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon would ascend to the throne and become an emperor. However, until the day she died, she was still an immortal sword wielder. Later on, it was said that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was sufficient, and she even had a sword spirit connection with the Emperor Sword of Ether. Being able to form a sword spirit connection with the Emperor Sword meant that she had a 100% chance of successfully synchronizing with the Emperor Sword of Ether. However, in the end, she had never touched the Emperor Sword of Ether until the drunken monk Jendi succeeded in synchronizing with the Emperor Sword of Ether. Since then, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's hopes of becoming Jendi had completely disappeared. Although there were no written records of this, almost all of the later generations could say with certainty that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had a crush on the drunken monk Jendi her entire life. In order for the drunken monk Jendi to ascend to the throne, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had even given up on her own hope of becoming emperor and voluntarily gave the Emperor Sword of Ether to the drunken monk Jendi. Unfortunately, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's infatuation did not come to fruition. In the end, the drunken monk Jendi did not end up with Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. Instead, he became a monk and became a bald monk. He was the only Jendi among all the Jendi to become a monk. After that, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon locked herself up in the Fleeting family and never came out again. Later on, she married some man and had children with him. Perhaps she didn't marry at all and only had children. 2 years after she gave birth to the heir of the Fleeting family, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon passed away. 2 years later, the drunken monk Gendi ascended as well. No one in the later generations knew what had happened between them. Even if they knew, they did not dare to say it out loud. No one dared to cause trouble for the fleeting family. It was such a good love story that no one dared to write a book or a script about it. It was a waste of a top-tier IP. From the contents of the note, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3-6 revolutions elixirs from the descendants of the Wudang clan and promised that her descendants would pay back 10 times the amount. As long as the descendants of the Wudang clan came to her with this note, her descendants would have to pay back the debt immediately. They could not afford to waste even a single second. Here was the question. How many 6 revolutions elixirs did the descendants of the Wudang clan have? Yi Qing had obtained one from the descendants of the Wudang clan and left it to Gu Han. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3 more from the descendants of the Wudang clan. Who knew how many 6 revolutions elixirs the descendants of the Wudang clan had left? However, on second thought, since Yi Qing could take away a 6 revolutions elixir from the descendants of the Wudang clan, it was clear that Yi Qing had a very good relationship with the descendants of the Wudang clan. It was not strange that Yi Qing would entrust his affairs to the descendants of the Wudang clan. Right now, Gu Han was not interested in the 6 revolutions elixir. What he really cared about was the problem of the note. With the value of 3-6 revolutions elixirs and the promise of paying back 10 times the amount, let alone 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, the fleeting family would have made a profit even if they asked for 30,000 cubic centimeters. Moreover, Gu Han believed that with the foundation of the fleeting family, 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood should not be a problem. The fleeting family had given birth to a total of 4 Gendi, and every generation of Gendi had a good relationship with the fleeting family. If the fleeting family left a few thousand cc of sovereign blood for each of their own Gendi, and then each of the other Gendi gave 500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood to the fleeting family, it would not be a problem for the fleeting family to accumulate tens of thousands of cc of sovereign blood. Therefore, Gu Han no longer had any doubts that this note would be able to obtain 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. However, at the same time, new doubts surfaced in Gu Han's mind. The borrower of this note was clearly from the Wudang clan. It belonged to the Wudang clan. Originally, Ji Yuhan had thought that the promissory note had been loaned out by the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor, and that the Wu-Tang lineage was only temporarily keeping it for the Sword Emperor. He had never expected that the promissory note actually belonged to the Wu-Tang lineage. What right did the Wu-Tang lineage have to give such a precious promissory note to Ji Yuhan? If Gu Han was the successor of the Wudang clan, he definitely would not care about the teachings of his ancestors and directly give this note to the fleeting family in exchange for enough resources for his growth. Only an idiot would give it to someone unrelated. For example, the child who was glaring at Gu Han right now. If it was not for his grandfather stopping him, this child would have snatched the note back from Gu Han's hands. Why? This IOU clearly belongs to you, doesn't it? Why are you willing to give it to me? Gu Han asked the old man. He felt that if he did not ask this now, he would never have the time to ask this question again. Sir, you're wrong. This is no longer something that belongs to the Wudang clan. This belongs to you in the first place. The old man coughed up a mouthful of blood. Back then, the Wudang clan committed a sin that cannot be redeemed even with 10,000 deaths. I only hope that this note can allow the Wudang clan to redeem 1/10 of our sins. It will be worth it. What sins did you commit? Such a precious note can only redeem 1/10 of our sins. Ji Yuhan was very curious as to what crime the Wu-Tang lineage had committed in the past to actually cause them to be in such a miserable state. Back then. The old man mumbled for a long time, but he could not catch his breath. In the end, his body went limp and he fell back onto the bed, dead. Grandfather. Little C let out a sorrowful cry and threw herself onto her grandfather's body, letting out a series of tragic cries. Chapter 748. In the end, Gu Han still did not know what sin the old man was talking about. But there was no doubt that the Wu-Tang lineage had reached its final, desperate state. This stubborn little boy named Xiao Hai had become the last successor of the Wu-Tang lineage. Do you really not need my help? Ji Han stood at the door of little Hai's room, looking at the little boy who was immersed in sorrow, but was filled with determination. For the first time, she asked a question, wanting to take the initiative to help this child. Gu Han saw himself in the child. 12 years ago, he had also stood up strong after losing his parents and sister. That was how he got to where he was today. Gu Han seemed to see the shadow of himself from 12 years ago in the child. No need. My Wu-Tang lineage relies on ourselves in everything we do. We definitely do not need the help of hypocrites like you. For some reason, the child was always filled with hostility towards Gu Han, as if Gu Han was the murderer who had destroyed his family. Then what do you plan to do with these things? Gu Han looked at the various treasures in the room and could not help but ask worriedly. Xiao Hai was only a child of 7 or 8 years old. Whether or not he could support himself was already a problem, let alone protect these precious scriptures. Gu Han was worried that not only would these scriptures not become Xiao Hai's wealth, but they would also become a source of danger for him. If someone found out that he had so many treasures hidden in his house, he might not be able to keep his life. What? Is it not enough to take my family's promissory note? You want to take away our scriptures? Xiao Hai sneered. I am the Wu-Tang sect leader now. If you want our Wu-Tang sect scriptures, then kill me. As long as you kill me, all these things will be yours. Forget it. You're on your own. If you have any problems, you can come to me. If I can help you, I will definitely help you. In the face of such a stubborn child, Gu Han didn't want to interfere. He casually wrote a note with his contact number on it and placed it on the table. Then he greedily left little Hai's house with the note. As little C watched Gu Han leave, the stubborn little C seemed to suddenly lose the strength to support herself. She slumped to the ground, holding her head and crying for a long time before standing up again. He walked to the side of the table and picked up the note that Gu Han had left behind. He roughly glanced at the contact number on the note and tore it into pieces. That night, everyone on the street knew that the last elder of the last swordsman family had passed away. Their grandson went to the council the next day and moved to a new house in the second ring. Then, he quickly left the street and the core area. No one knew where he had moved to. Unexpectedly, after 3 days, Gu Han had no choice but to return to the Flowing Year Mountains entrance. Even the 2 guards at the entrance were a little surprised to see him. They didn't know why he came back. However, this time, Gu Han didn't enjoy the sumptuous reception like the last time. He registered at the entrance, and the guard reported to the higher-ups. Soon, news came that Gu Han was allowed to go up the mountain. However, the person who received Gu Han in this life was not fleeting wooden fish, but a man who looked a little dispirited. Although he was dressed very well, Gu Han could feel a sense of dispiritedness from his body. Gu Han couldn't feel any liveliness that a normal person should have. If not for the fact that Gu Han had seen him in photos countless times, Gu Han would never believe that the man in front of him was the current head of the Flowing Year family, Liuyan Ling's biological father. According to Liuyan Ling, her father was still fighting in Moscow when Gu Han arrived 3 days ago. Who would have thought that he would be able to return to Yangjing City in just 3 days? Only Jendi was capable of such speed. Why are you looking for us? Fleeting wooden fish asked weakly. Didn't you reject my father's offer? Why are you looking for us? For some reason. Ji Han could sense a hint of happiness in Fleeting Time's expression when he spoke, as if he had benefited from his rejection of Fleeting Time's wooden fish. It's like this. I was lucky this morning, and I found this IOU. I wonder if the Flowing Year family will accept it. Gu Han placed the IOU in front of Fleeting Wooden Fish. What a joke. We've always been the ones borrowing from others. Why would the Flowing Year family borrow from others? Fleeting Wooden Fish finally showed a hint of liveliness when he heard Gu Han's words. His liveliness was quickly replaced by shock. Where did you get this IOU from? Fleeting Wooden Fish asked excitedly. A poor child gave it to me. It seems that the Flowing Year family knows about this IOU. A smile appeared on Ji Han's face. He could tell from Fleeting Time's excited expression that the IOU was genuine. So the Wu-Tang clan is still alive. Tell me, where are the members of the Wu-Tang clan? I want you to tell me right now. Fleeting wooden fish was agitated. It was as if he was desperate to find the successor of the Wu-Tang clan. I don't know. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Guhan replied coldly. Although no one had spoken ill of the Flowing Year family for the past 1,000 years, and no one had ever heard of their misdeeds, only the heavens knew what was going on. Even someone like Wang Jingwei, who had died a horrible death, had been turned into a good person by someone, let alone the Lunyan family, who was still the leader of the entire world and vaguely controlled the highest authority of the human race. Fleeting Time was stunned for a moment before he finally calmed down, and sat down in front of Ji Han with a straight face. Aren't you afraid that I'll take this IOU from you? Fleeting Wooden Fish suddenly asked. This is the Flowing Year family. With a single thought, this IOU will never exist. No one will know that you've been to the Flowing Year family and went missing. I know. Guhan nodded with a smile. That's why I bet. I bet that the Flowing Year family is the pillar of humanity, the future of humanity, and the conscience of humanity. Since the Flowing Year family is the conscience of humanity, they will not take this IOU from me. You have a glib tongue. I really don't know why Ling would fall for someone like you. The way Fleeting Time looked at Ji Han was like how a mother-in-law would look at her son-in-law. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Forget it, I'll let the mother-in-law look at her son-in-law then. It's a pretty good description. Me. Since you're giving me this IOU, you must want something from me. Tell me, what do you want from the Flowing Year family? Fleeting Wooden Fish did not wait for Guhan to speak. I remember now. My dad told me that you want to sever your hair, right? Very well. I'll take charge of this matter. I'll give you the severed black hair. Take it and leave quickly. If you're too late, you won't be able to take it when my dad returns. With that, Fleeting Wooden Fish took out the Green Slayer from his dimensional pocket. It appeared that he had been keeping the Green Slayer in his dimensional pocket all this time, as if he was prepared to give it to Guhan. However, it seemed like Fleeting Wooden Fish was not at home at the moment. It was precisely because Fleeting Wooden Fish was not at home that Fleeting Wooden Fish was able to make the decision. If not, Guhan would still have to deal with the cunning Fleeting Wooden Fish. Master, you're wrong. Sever my hair was very important to me 3 days ago, but it no longer holds any meaning to me after 3 days. I no longer need it, said Guhan. The reason why Guhan needed the Green Slayer so badly was because he wanted to use it to sever the Juzi sword so that he could synchronize with the King of Yu's Gojian sword. However, according to the current plan, the King of Yu would be reborn into the body of an ancient sword maiden. When that time came, Guhan would no longer need to sever the Juzi sword, but the ancient sword Qingpin sword. What kind of joke was this? The Juzi sword gritted its teeth and gave up. There was not much emotion in it anyway. However, how could Guhan give up on the Qingpin sword? To be honest, if Guhan had to choose between the Qingpin sword and the King of Yu's sword, the Qingpin sword would have a higher chance of winning. Fortunately, Guhan did not need to sever the sword mark between himself and the Qingpin sword. This was because the ancient sword maiden that was born after the King of Yu's rebirth was a sword maiden without the original wielder. At the same time, the King of Yu's soul was connected to Guhan's soul. Therefore, Guhan could use the sword maiden grafting technique to make the reborn King of Yu his own sword maiden. When that time came, Guhan would only need to use the yin-yang swordplay technique again to make the reborn King of Yu and Qingpin happy together, just like the relationship between Yi Tian and Du Yu. Therefore, even if the green sever sword was given to Guhan for free, Guhan would not even spare it a glance. No matter which sword maiden it was, Guhan could not bear to kill her. The green sever sword was no longer attractive to Guhan. You don't want it anymore? Fleeting Time looked at Guhan suspiciously, then pushed the green sever sword to the side and said after a moment of silence, You brat, don't tell me you're still thinking about my Ling. Let me tell you, even if my dad doesn't reject you, I won't allow you to be with Ling. Ling is not good enough for you. Just give up. What did Fleeting Time mean? What did he mean by Guhan is thinking about Ling? What did he mean by Ling is not good enough for Guhan? Who is the daughter of the #1 aristocratic family? Chapter 749. Don't worry, Master Liu Nian. I have no ulterior motives towards Miss Ling. I'm here with this promissory note in hopes of obtaining the Emperor's blood. Ji Yuhan decided not to waste any more time with fleeting time, so he revealed his true purpose of coming here. Emperor's blood? What do you want that for? Are you planning to go somewhere dangerous? Fleeting time let out a sigh of relief when he heard that Ji Yuhan was not here for his daughter. You brat, you have no conscience at all. You're not here for Rinrin. You're not here for Rinrin. There was a hint of disappointment in Fleeting Time's voice. Why did it feel like Fleeting Time was hoping that Guhan would take Liunian Ling away? How many drops of Emperor's blood do you want? Will 1,000 drops be enough? It's enough for you to die 1,000 times over, Fleeting Time said generously, as if giving Guhan 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood was a generous thing to do. It's not enough. It's not enough. Master Liu Nian, please speak with your conscience. Is 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood worth the powder of a 6 revolutions pill? Guhan retorted. A cubic meter of Emperor's blood could be divided into 20 drops. 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood was only equivalent to 50 cubic meters. It was a drop in the ocean for Guhan. About that. Fleeting Time was clearly not a liar. He knew better than anyone else the miraculous effects of a 6 revolutions immortal pill. It was too stingy to trade 1,000 drops of Monarch's blood for a single 6 revolutions immortal pill. I'll make it 500 cubic centimeters then, Fleeting Time said through gritted teeth. He was afraid that Guhan did not understand the exact content of 500 cubic centimeters, so he added, a cubic meter is equivalent to 20 drops of Emperor's blood. My 500 cubic centimeters is equivalent to 10,000 drops of Emperor's blood. I'll give you 10 times that amount. 10 times is not enough. Guhan frowned. Master Liu Nian, I can't be bothered to beat around the bush. I want 20 times the amount. 20 times. Let me think about it. No problem. 1,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign's blood, it's decided. Fleeting Time answered without hesitation. Sigh, Comrade Ji Yuhan, you have no idea how important this 1,000 cubic centimeters is to the Fleeting Time clan. It's equivalent to half of our clan's inventory. It'll take us 500 years to replenish it. Fleeting Time actually began to complain to Ji Yuhan about how poor he was. Patriarch Liu Nian, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I'm going to increase it by 20 times. In other words, I'm going to increase it by 20 times from 500 cubic centimeters, not 50 cubic centimeters. Guhan did not give Fleeting Time the chance to continue his act. He immediately told Fleeting Time the amount he needed. On the base of 500 cubic centimeters, increase it by 20 times. 10,000 cubic centimeters. Even with the wealth of the Fleeting Time clan could not afford the amount that Guhan was asking for. That's impossible. You're asking for too much. Do you think the Fleeting Time clan is a tycoon? We won't be able to withdraw such a huge amount even if we empty out our entire storage. Young man, don't be too greedy. Do you really think the Fleeting Time clan is rich? Fleeting Time clan said angrily. Patriarch, I, Guhan, never ask for more than a cent from others. What's mine is mine. Are you telling me that 3 6 revolutions pills are not worth 10,000 cubic centimeters of imperial blood? Guhan retorted. A 6 revolutions pill is a super treasure that can turn an ordinary person into an immortal sword wielder. Even so, it's still not worth it. That's 10,000 cubic centimeters of imperial blood. How can 3 6 revolutions pills compare to that? Fleeting Time clan snorted. I admit that the 6 revolutions pill is miraculous and can create an immortal sword wielder. However, the swordbearer must be a disciple of the Ren school, or else this 6-cycle celestial pill will turn from a divine medicine to a poison. To most people, this 6-cycle celestial pill is even worse than trash. You want to use something like this to exchange for our Liu Nian family's 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood? All right. Since Patriarch Liu Nian said that 3 6 revolutions immortal pills are not worth 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, may I ask how much sovereign blood a single 6 revolutions immortal pill is worth? Please give me a clear price, Patriarch Liu Nian. Then I'll give you a price. 300 years ago, a 6 revolutions pill was auctioned off at the Soaring Dragon auction. In the end, it was exchanged for a Duke dimensional crystal. If you hand over a Duke-type dimensional crystal to the Sword Committee Association, you will receive 40 million hero coins, and the exchange price for 1 cubic centimeter of sovereign blood is 100,000 hero coins. Therefore, a 6 revolutions pill is worth 400 cubic centimeters of imperial blood. Since the Blood Moon Patriarch owes you 3 6 revolutions pills, I'll give you 1,200 cubic centimeters of imperial blood. After a long discussion, Fleeting Time finally calculated the price of the 6 revolutions immortal pill for the sovereign blood. At first glance, it sounded like a very fair calculation. It was still the price from the auction. When it came to auctions, people would naturally think that it was a way to maximize the value of an item. The best way to reflect the value of an item was through auctions. Therefore, the price was very fair. But in reality, Fleeting Time had secretly hidden an inconspicuous trap in his words. That was, a Duke dimensional crystal was worth 40 million hero coins. It was true that a Duke dimensional crystal was worth 40 million hero coins. However, this 40 million hero coins was the purchasing price of the Sword Committee, not the exchange price. Apart from ordinary people with no ability, anyone who would sell it to the Sword Committee at such a price would be a complete idiot. What a joke. A Duke dimensional crystal was already worth 90 million hero coins in the black market. Who would sell it to the Sword Committee for 40 million hero coins? However, the Sword Committee was selling it for 100,000 hero coins. The Sword Committee had placed it in the mission exchange, and it could be bought with 100,000 hero coins. There had never been a shortage of it. However, this was only a loophole in the price. More importantly, the price of this 6 revolutions immortal pill was 300 years ago. Today, 300 years later, there was still an endless supply of sovereign bloodlines. Even though the production of Commandery King seeds was much less than 300 years ago, 6 revolution celestial pills had completely disappeared. Even if you had money, you would not be able to buy one. Guhan believed that if he were to auction a 6 revolutions pill at the Dragon Ascension auction now, the price would at least double. Although Guhan knew that Liu Nian's calculation method had given him a huge advantage, he did not want to continue arguing with him. Because in the absence of an absolutely fair reference, arguing over the price of an item would never yield a conclusion. All right, family head Liu Nian, you have a point. I, Guhan, am convinced. We'll go according to the price you mentioned. A 6 revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of imperial blood, and these 3 6 revolutions pills are equivalent to 1,200 cubic centimeters of imperial blood. Guhan said with a pained expression. At least you know your stuff. I've already calculated it for you. Liu Nian nodded in satisfaction. Then I'll confirm with family head one last time. A 6 revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of imperial blood, right? Guhan suddenly asked again in a serious tone. That's right. That's the price. Liu Nian nodded solemnly. You're not going to change it. Fair trade. Heaven and earth as witness. Sun and moon as witness. Swear on the honor of the Liu Nian clan. A 6 revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of imperial blood. Is there something wrong with you? Do you have to repeat it so many times? Liu Nian glared at Guhan in dissatisfaction. My Liu Nian clan has always been a man of his word. I've said that this is the price, and this is the price. Heaven and earth as witness, sun and moon as witness. I swear on the honor of the Liu Nian clan that this is the price. Since that's the case, I have nothing else to say. The Liu Nian clan is truly the fairest clan in the world. I, Guhan, am utterly impressed. Guhan finally said sincerely. Fleeting Zheng heaved a sigh of relief when the price was finally set. Since the price has been set, this IOU is useless to me. Shall I tear it up now? He said as he picked up the promissory note. Go ahead. Guhan waved his hand. This receipt has already been returned to the Liu Nian clan. It's yours now. Good. 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 Fleeting Time said, and with a wave of his sword aura, the IOU slip was reduced to dust. Unless time was reversed, no one would be able to repair the IOU slip. Comrade Guhan, please wait here for a moment. I'll go get you 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood right now. Liu Nian was about to get up to retrieve the Imperial blood for Guhan. Wait. Guhan suddenly spoke up. You're wrong. It's not 1,200 cubic centimeters, it's 12,000 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood. Liu Nian Zheng's face immediately turned the color of a pig's liver. He glared at Ji Yuhan viciously. Lad, although our Liu Nian clan values justice, fairness, and benevolence, we do not dare to offend you. However, we will not allow anyone to toy with us. You can either scram after you get the 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood, or scram right now. What's the meaning of this? Is the Liu Nian clan going to go back on their word? Are you going to disregard the price we agreed on? Guhan retorted. We've agreed on a price of 400 cubic centimeters, not 4,000 cubic centimeters. Are you going to deny it? Fleeting Time continued to rage. That's right. I admit that it's 400 cubic centimeters. Heaven and earth are my witnesses, and the sun and moon are my witnesses. Ji Yuhan repeated mischievously, leaving Fleeting Time confused. What's she trying to say? What's he trying to do? My apologies, Lord Liu Nian. I took the wrong IOU just now. That was an IOU that I made after I modified it with the quantum scanner. The real IOU is here. Guhan suddenly produced another receipt, and placed it in front of Fleeting Time. It was only then that Fleeting Time noticed that the new IOU was different from the previous one. It had the words 10 times written on it. Chapter 750. It was a trick that Guhan had used to lure his enemies into his trap. In the future 1,000 years from now, humans would be able to use quantum technology to create many unimaginable black technologies, such as quantum copying. Quantum copying was basically the process of making a complete copy of an item through quantum mimicry. Not only would the copied item be identical in every detail, it would even be able to replicate the age of the paper. If one were to take a piece of paper from 1,000 years ago and make a quantum copy of the paper, they would discover that the paper was also from 1,000 years ago. That was why Fleeting Time knew that it was Guhan's fault when he saw the paper. He took a quick look at the age of the paper, and after confirming that it was indeed from 700 years ago, he no longer doubted the authenticity of the IOU. Fleeting Time knew that his ancestor had left such a IOU for him, and it was clearly recorded in the family history of Fleeting Time's family. However, Fleeting Time's blood moon was careless when he wrote the family history, and did not complete the contents of the IOU. The IOU only stated that Fleeting Time had borrowed 3-6 revolutions elixirs from the Wu-Tang clan, and that if anyone were to approach Fleeting Time's family with this IOU, they would have to repay the IOU according to its contents without delay. The matter was kept a secret, and Fleeting Time believed that no one other than the Wu-Tang clan would know about it. Naturally, it was impossible for the Wu-Tang clan to forge the IOU. Besides, Fleeting Time's handwriting was extremely rare, and not something that could be easily replicated. Most importantly, Fleeting Time did not expect Guhan to deceive the Fleeting Time's family with a fake IOU. It had been centuries since anyone dared to deceive the Fleeting Time's family with a fake IOU, unless that person was tired of living. In fact, it was also very easy to distinguish the authenticity of things that were quantum copied. This was because there was a fatal flaw in the vicinity of quantum. That was, the copied thing only needed to be scanned by an electronic scanner to discover the quantum residue on the surface. How could one determine that it was a quantum copy? Once bitten, twice shy, Fleeting Time immediately brought Ji Yuhan to the appraisal room of the Fleeting Time family residence when Ji Yuhan took out the real IOU. He scanned the IOU with a quantum scanner a dozen times, and only after confirming that there was not a single quantum on the IOU was he able to verify the authenticity of the IOU. There was no doubt that the IOU was the real deal. It was also at this moment that Fleeting Time finally understood Guhan's scheme. The treacherous Guhan had first presented a fake IOU to Fleeting Time. Fleeting Time had repeatedly confirmed the price of the 6 revolutions pill with Guhan, leading Fleeting Time to believe that Fleeting Time would only need to pay 1,200 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. If Fleeting Time had known that the IOU would have to pay 10 times the price, he would never have agreed to the price of a 6 revolutions pill that was equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Now that the price had been confirmed, the Fleeting Time clan had to repay Guhan 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood to Fleeting Time. Fleeting Time was in so much pain that he wanted to knock himself out so that he could extricate himself from the awkward situation. That was 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Even Fleeting Time himself was not sure if the Fleeting Time clan had that much Sovereign's blood in their vault. No. You've lied to me about the price. I refuse to accept it. We must discuss the price again. Fleeting Time immediately changed his stance. Master Fleeting Time, I admit that I was wrong to lie to you with a fake IOU. However, I did not lie to you about the price. You were the one who calculated the price from the beginning. You compared the price of the Soaring Dragon auction, the Dungeon King's blood, and the Heroes' coins of the Sword Committee. I did not say a single word. How can you say that I lied to you about the price? Guhan retorted. Fleeting Time wanted to slap himself when he heard Guhan's words. Why did I lie to you about the price of the 6 revolutions pill? Now that I'm the one who set the price, there's nothing I can say to refute it. However, is he really going to pay Guhan 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood just like that? There was no way Fleeting Time clan would agree to that. He was even more unwilling to be a fool after he was deceived by the fake IOU. Fleeting Time clan and Guhan were in a stalemate. One side insisted that the price was not valid and demanded a recalculation. The other side repeated that the price was set by Fleeting Time clan himself. It was the most reasonable price, and there was no room for recalculation. The two of them quarreled for almost an hour. In order not to waste everyone's time, the dialogue of the quarrel was not written. Anyway, until the two of them were exhausted, the two sides still did not reach a compromise. What are you arguing about? What a scandal. Fleeting Wooden Fish, who had not been seen for a long time, walked into the room. Fleeting Time immediately stood up from his seat and gave way to Fleeting Time Wooden Fish to take his seat. Fleeting Time clan then whispered into Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's ear and recounted the entire process. What? 12,000 cc. Even a sly old fox like Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was shocked when he heard that there was 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Kid, where did you get the courage to ask for so much Sovereign's blood from the Fleeting Time clan? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish asked in an unfriendly tone. I don't need any courage. I only believe in one thing. Guhan replied calmly. Oh, what do you believe in? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish retorted. If you return what you borrowed, it won't be difficult to borrow again. Ji Han enunciated each and every word clearly. It's not difficult to borrow again if you return what you borrowed. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish repeated the words 3 times. The dissatisfaction on his face gradually disappeared, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Good. Well said, that was indeed the case. It's not difficult to borrow again if you return what you borrowed. Little Zhang, go to the treasury and retrieve 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood and hand it over to Brother Guhan. Unexpectedly, the arrival of Fleeting Time Wooden Fish had brought about a breakthrough. Once this old man opened his mouth, he would just go straight to the point. The 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood was given to Fleeting Time Wooden Fish. Yes, father. It was obvious that Fleeting Time was very obedient to his father. He immediately went to the family's treasury, and returned with a briefcase in hand to Ji Han. Guhan opened the suitcase, and found that it was filled with liquid nitrogen. There were transparent test tubes in the liquid nitrogen, and every single one of them contained golden blood. Guhan took out one of the test tubes and took a sniff to confirm that it was indeed Sovereign's blood. Thank you, Fleeting Time clan, for your generosity. Guhan placed the suitcase to the side, and bowed deeply to the displeased Fleeting Time Wooden Fish and Fleeting Time Wooden Fish. I know that I've been too rash this time. It's a little too much to ask for 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood with a loan slip. However, I can't do anything about it. I have things that I must do. This lowly one will never forget the Fleeting Time Clan's great kindness. If the Fleeting Time Clan has any requests in the future, this lowly one will do his best to repay the favor. This time, Guhan was speaking the truth. He had indeed taken advantage of the Fleeting Time Clan. Aside from the Fleeting Time Clan, there was probably no other clan in the world that would be willing to be taken advantage of by Guhan. Take the Emperor Sword families in Yuzhong City for example. Not to mention 1,200 cubic centimeters, they would probably think of a way to make Ji Yuhan disappear from this world without anyone knowing the moment Ji Yuhan took out the loan receipt. There's no need to be so polite. Feel free to look for us if you have any difficulties in the future. The Fleeting Time Clan will be more than happy to help. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish laughed, and asked, when do you plan to activate the Furnace of Heaven and Earth? Guhan was stunned. Senior Fleeting Time, how did you know that I'm going to activate the Furnace of Heaven and Earth? Is it that hard to guess? For you to take away so much sovereign bloodline at once without caring about your face, you must be planning something big. In this world, the only thing that you can do that requires so much sovereign blood is probably the worldly furnace. I can even guess why you're activating the Furnace of Heaven and Earth. Since you don't care about Sever Green Hair anymore, it means that you don't want to cut off your sword mark anymore. Could it be that you want to forge a new sword, Maiden? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish suddenly asked. Forge a new sword, Maiden? A huge question mark flashed across Guhan's mind. From Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's words, could this Furnace of Heaven and Earth have the ability to forge a new sword, Maiden? This was something that Guhan had never heard of before. Guhan had to get to the bottom of this. Senior Fleeting Time, what do you mean by forging a new sword, Maiden? Guhan asked urgently. You don't know? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish looked very surprised. Didn't you want my 12,000 cubic centimeters sovereign blood to forge a new sword, Maiden? Only a new sword, Maiden, requires more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood to activate the Furnace of Heaven and Earth. If it's just a simple repair, a 4,000 cubic centimeters sovereign blood is enough. Guhan fell silent. He was afraid that Fleeting Time Wooden Fish would ask for the extra 8,000 cubic centimeters if he told him that it was for repair. Fortunately, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish did not bring up the topic again. Instead, he changed the topic to something else. Ji Yuhan, do you know the other important reason why this old man agreed to your request so readily? This lowly one does not know. Ji Yuhan replied honestly. Because even if you didn't activate the Furnace of Heaven and Earth, I would have done so sooner or later. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish let out a long sigh. If I don't activate the Furnace of Heaven and Earth soon, I'm afraid that Lena will not be able to live. Chapter 751. After a round of verbal sparring, Guhan finally left the Liunyan family with the 12,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor's blood. But when Ji Yuhan left, he left with a tail behind him, a silent and gloomy Reina Takasaka. As a condition for Ji Yuhan to take away the 12,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, Ji Yuhan had to bring Reina Takasaka with him. According to Fleeting Wooden Fish's words, Reina Kosaka had to make a trip to the Furnace of Heaven and Earth, or she would die for sure. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish did not explain the reason behind it, but Ji Yuhan could see that Fleeting Time's expression was as if his mother had just died. So be it. Guhan did not want to interfere with the Liunyan family's matters. After all, he was only bringing Reina Kosaka to the Furnace of Heaven and Earth. It would not affect Guhan in any way, so there was no need to go against the Liunyan family's wishes. Unlike the last time when Guhan took a car to Yangjing City, the Liunyan family agreed to use their quantum teleportation circle to teleport Guhan. In the blink of an eye, Guhan and Reina Kosaka were back in Yangjing City. Knock knock. Song Ifei thought that it was Guhan's return when she heard the knocking on the door. She opened the door in surprise. It was Guhan. Unfortunately, Song Ifei's smile did not last for more than a few minutes. She saw a girl following behind Guhan. Who is this woman? Song Ifei took a good look at Reina Takasaka and realized that she was a woman that he had never seen before. She could not help but sigh bitterly in her heart. What did I do in my previous life? Why did I fall in love with a man like Guhan? In the blink of an eye, there's another woman in his harem. Why is my life so bitter? Ife, don't get the wrong idea. I can't tell you the specifics, but I can assure you that I don't have that kind of relationship with this woman. Ji Yuhan seemed to have sensed Song Ifei's thoughts, so he added dryly. Is Ji Yuhan trying to explain himself to me? He was worried about my thoughts and was afraid that I would be jealous, so he explained it to me, right? That must be it. Women must be good at comforting themselves, just like Song Ifei. Just one explanation from Guhan was enough for her to imagine a lot of things, and she instantly became much happier. Guhan, wait a little longer. I'll be ready for dinner soon. You and Miss Lena can have a taste of my cooking. Every time Guhan appeared in front of her, Song Ifei couldn't help promoting her cooking skills, as if it was the only thing she could show to Guhan. Although in fact, cooking was the only thing she could show to Guhan. That's not it. I won't be able to eat your cooking this time. Guhan began to quickly pack up his personal belongings in the room. I have a very urgent matter now. I have to go out immediately. I see. Song Ifei's face was a little gloomy, but she immediately forced a smile and said, It doesn't matter. I'll heat it up for you. You can eat it later. No. I'm afraid I can't come back tonight. In fact, I don't know when I can come back. I'll try to come back before the Octagon Assembly. You can spend the next few days with Lu Shihua. You two can also be companions. Guhan's flat answer made Song Ifei's mood fall to the bottom. She could only hear the sound of a string in her brain breaking. Get out. Get out of my sight right now. Song Ifei suddenly rushed to Guhan's side and kicked Guhan's butt, trying to kick Guhan out. However, how could Song Ifei compare with Guhan's reaction speed? Just as Song Ifei lifted her leg, Ji Yuhan's hand reached behind him and directly grabbed Song Ifei's ankle. Then, he forcefully pulled her whole body into his embrace. Wait for me. When I come back, I'll have a good meal with you. After saying this in a very domineering manner, Guhan gently placed Song Ifei on the sofa and then left Song Ifei's house with his Jianyo and Rina Kosaka. Bastard. Who wants to eat with you? If you dare, don't ever come back to see me again. Guhan could hear Song Ifei's whining behind him, but he did not look back because turning back would not change anything. What a sinful man. When Guhan completely left Song Ifei's temporary residence, Rina Kosaka, who had been following behind Guhan without saying a word, suddenly said this sarcastically. All of us are sinful. Otherwise, why are we still living in this world? Guhan replied coldly and did not say another word. Rina Kosaka seemed to be too lazy to talk to Guhan anymore. The two of them walked forward in silence and then got on the bus. After a while, Rina Kosaka found herself following Guhan to the front of a 4S shop. The 4S shop clerk who was humming a tune noticed someone entering the shop through the reflection on the ground. He immediately raised his head with a professional smile. Before he could say the word welcome, he was stunned. You. It's you. The 4S shop clerk was shocked to find that the person in front of him was none other than the super rich man who bought a Yanghuang 3008 from him a few days ago. However, this rich man's behavior was a little too overbearing. He did not even complete the basic procedures and directly drove away. If he had not paid the money in advance, this unlucky clerk would definitely be fired by the boss. He might even have to bear a large debt. Fortunately, not only did Guhan not lose a cent, but he also earned a few million. Therefore, not only was the clerk not punished, but he was also rewarded by the manager. He was given a month's salary as a bonus, so he was beaming with joy. Sir, what business do you have with us? Is there something wrong with that Yanghuang 3008? You just need to tell us, and we'll fix it properly for you. The clerk snapped out of his daze and immediately stuck close to Guhan, serving Guhan well. This was a super rich man. Who knew, he might even buy a super hover sports car from him in the future. He could not afford to lose such a customer. Just as the shop assistant had expected, Ji Yuhan's first request was to buy another super hover sports car. Moreover, he wanted to buy another Yanghuang 3008. This was something that couldn't be helped. If Ji Yuhan wanted to return to Yuzhong City, he would need a super hover car. Although there was still an hour before the super hover train to Yuzhong City left, it was not a problem for Guhan to take the armored hover train back. However, the commissioner of the sword committee who was in charge of supervising the smelting of the broken sword lady was also on the armored hover train. If he took the armored hover train, Guhan and the commissioner would arrive at Yuzhong City at the same time. If that happened, whether or not Guhan could get the broken sword lady before the commissioner was a huge risk. There was another problem. Although the armored hover train was safe, its speed was very slow. When Guhan came, it took him 7 days to reach Yangjing City. This round trip took 14 days, and he had to go to the furnace of heaven and earth in between. In this way, it was impossible for Guhan to make it to the 8 school assembly in 15 days. After all, Guhan had promised the tiger's raw sword spirit. At the same time, he was representing Yuzhong City. If he could not be absent, Guhan did not want to be absent. Therefore, Guhan had to go to Yuzhong City alone. That super hover sports car that was fast enough became Guhan's essential transportation tool. And Guhan's original Yang Huang 3008 had been given to the Ministry of Transportation as a bargaining chip. Naturally, he did not have the face or the time to ask for it back. Fortunately, Guhan had a lot of money now. He could just spend some more money to buy another Yang Huang 3008. However, when Ji Yuhan mentioned that he wanted to buy another Yang Huang 3008, the shop assistant had a troubled look on his face. Their shop was located in a remote area, and their main customers could not afford such an expensive super hover sports car like the Yang Huang 3008. Therefore, their shop did not have long-term stock. The previous Yang Huang 3008 was just about to be delivered to the Yuzhong branch, so it was stored in their shop. Therefore, their shop no longer had a Yang Huang 3008. Even if Guhan had the money, he could not buy it. Immediately, Guhan suggested that they could lower the price and buy a slightly slower super hover sports car. However, the shop assistant helplessly said that the fastest maglev sports car in their shop did not exceed 1,500 km per hour. Forget it. Looks like I have to make a trip back to the core area. Guhan was helpless. He could only make a trip back to the core area and buy a super hover sports car from the 4S shop. Seeing that his super rich customer was leaving, the shop assistant panicked. He hurriedly pulled Guhan's hand and said, "Sir, let me ask you one thing. Is it fine as long as it's a car that's fast enough?" "That's right. As long as it's fast enough, it's fine." Guhan nodded. "Then I'll bring you to a place. There will definitely be something that can satisfy your requirements. However, you must promise me that you will never mention that place to anyone else. Otherwise, I will not be able to keep my life." The shop assistant looked around cautiously, then whispered to Guhan. It was as if he really wanted to bring Guhan to a very mysterious place. "Lead the way." Guhan did not beat around the bush and said directly. Following the footsteps of the little shop assistant, Guhan walked all the way out. Finally, they left the 4th Ring Road and entered Yangjing City's 5th Ring Road. As mentioned before, Yangjing City's 5th Ring Road was not a residential area, but an industrial area. Therefore, there were almost no people in the 5th Ring Road. Even if there were people, they would stay in the factories. The streets were empty, and only a pedestrian could be seen every 10 minutes. Under the guidance of the shop assistant, after a series of turns, Guhan finally arrived at his destination. It was a place with a conspicuous sign that said, "Warehouse restricted, unauthorized persons not allowed." "Friend, what kind of car are you showing me? Why is it in such a secret place?" "Good car. Definitely a good car." The shop assistant shrunk his head. "That's prehistoric technology. I heard that it was invented by humans millions of years ago." Chapter 752. Prehistoric technology was not a new term to the general public or to Guhan. More than 300 years ago, a human named Jendi fought with the desolate level Yuan Ku. They fought their way to a depth of more than 60 kilometers underground. Then, they discovered the ruins of a human civilization deep underground. It was called the Prehistoric Civilization No. 1 Ruins. At the same time, because the ruins were discovered in Australia, combined with the ancient legends of Australia, the civilization was named the Lemurian civilization. According to the little information that humans had left, the Lemurian civilization disappeared 60 million years ago. It was a super prehistoric civilization that was the closest to modern humans. The reason for its destruction was said to be an interplanetary war with the 10th planet of the solar system. The final result was the complete disappearance of the Lemurian civilization, and the 10th planet of the solar system was blown into dust by the Lemurian civilization's Q-bomb attack. Although the historians had always been full of doubts about this legend, because this legend did not come from any historical information, but from the writing of a web novel writer before the apocalypse. However, no matter how much the historians doubted this story, there was no doubt that before the emergence of this generation of human civilization, there was already a previous generation of human civilization, and the previous generation of human civilization was completely wiped out due to some tragic reason. This could not help but remind people of the situation of modern humans. Similarly, science had also developed to the peak of planetary civilization, the beginning of space civilization, and then humans encountered something like Yuan Ku. If it was not for the sudden appearance of the Sword Lady, perhaps humans would have long disappeared without a trace like the previous generation of civilization. Perhaps after another 60 million years, the next generation of humans would be able to discover how glorious the human civilization was through the underground ruins. At the beginning, the Sword Committee also wanted to hide this matter, but later on, for some reason, the Sword Committee suddenly changed their mind and began to publicize the matter of the prehistoric civilization. They even filmed more than a dozen documentaries about this matter, causing a period of prehistoric civilization fever. Without a doubt, the prehistoric civilization had helped mankind in many ways. Since the discovery of the prehistoric civilization's ruins, many relics of the prehistoric civilization had been excavated from the ruins. These relics included a large number of quantum technology and medical biotechnology. These technologies, after being improved and reset by human scientists, became a series of quantum technological products, such as quantum teleportation arrays, quantum photocopiers, quantum communication networks, and so on. Biomedical technology, on the other hand, evolved into the miraculous black technology that reconstructed severed limbs, regenerated bodies, super medical cabins, and so on, saving countless swordbearers from the brink of death. Still, it was unusual that the Lemurian civilization only had quantum technology and biomedical technology, with no achievements in other areas. Some people would say that this was very normal. Different civilizations definitely had different strengths. This civilization was good at quantum technology and biomedical technology. So what if their other technologies were inferior? In this regard, Guhan expressed his doubts. Other technologies might indeed be inferior because of the characteristics of civilization. But as a super civilization that could wage war against another planet in the solar system, how could they not have outstanding space navigation technology? At the very least, it should be able to travel unimpeded in the solar system. However, after the discovery of the Lemurian civilization, mankind did not have any outstanding development in space technology. They only slowly advanced according to the technological level before the cataclysm, and only a few decades ago did they barely manage to build a forward base on the moon. The current human space technology was like the canoes of ancient times. It was the simplest and most inferior technology. Only God knew when they would be able to build a behemoth like an aircraft carrier that could travel unimpeded in the sea. So the super maglev flying car from the Lemurian civilization that the shop assistant mentioned had piqued Guhan's interest. According to the Sword Council, the Lemurian civilization did not include maglev technology. When Guhan was still the Sword Garrett's master, he had also looked up information on the Lemurian civilization and found that there was no record of maglev technology in the database. This was very interesting. Was the shop assistant making things up, or was the Sword Council lying? Even the Sword Garrett's master of Yuzhong City could not access this confidential information. Guhan was very interested. Not long after, Guhan saw the true appearance of this prehistoric super maglev flying car. The car sat quietly in the warehouse. Unlike what he had imagined, this flying car didn't have a heaven-shattering exterior design. It was just a smooth droplet-shaped exterior that was extremely simple, resembling the style of a certain brand from before the great calamity called Apple. There were 3 or 4 guards standing around with guns slung over their shoulders looking at the super maglev flying car. The guards' eyes were unfocused. Although their limbs were full of muscles, they did not have a solid foundation. Even among ordinary humans, these guards were only slightly stronger than the average person. They were not elites. To be honest, Ji Han did not care about such trash guards. Even if the guns on their backs ran out of bullets, they would not be able to pose a threat to Ji Han. As a result, the defense of this super hovering flying car was very lax. Not to mention a famed sword-tier swordsman like Ji Han, even a normal ancient sword-tier swordsman might be able to steal this super hovering flying car. Third brother, why are you here now? Don't you have work to do? A guard came up to greet him. Seeing Guhan being brought over by the shop assistant, he put on a look of realization. So you brought a customer here. That's right, that's right. This old man is a super tycoon. He paid the full amount of the Yang Huang 3008 without batting an eyelid. This old man said he wanted to buy a super maglev flying car that is faster than the Yang Huang 3008, so I brought him here. The shop assistant said with a smile. Is that so? Did you report this to the boss? The guard asked again. I did. I already told the whole thing to Boss Chen, and he gave his approval. Otherwise, I would not have dared to bring someone here. The shop assistant laughed. How about it? Why don't you let this old man take a closer look at this maglev flying car? Take a closer look. The guard glared at the shop assistant and said carelessly, this is a flying car from the prehistoric civilization. How can it be casually looked at? It's not like you can't look at it if you want. Pay up, 10,000 renminbi for a minute. These guards were indeed a motley crew. Other than money, there was nothing else in their eyes. They did not care about driving away their potential customers. Fortunately, Ji Han didn't care about this bit of money now. He simply took out his personal terminal and touched the guard's personal terminal, transferring 10,000 yuan over. Hee. You are indeed a tycoon. The guard laughed proudly. Look. But you are only allowed to look, not touch. If you dare to touch even a speck of paint on this super maglev flying car, I will pierce through your hand. Guhan did not say a word. He only nodded and walked to the side of the super maglev flying car. He walked around the car and realized that it was indeed prehistoric technology. There was not a single crack on the entire body of the maglev flying car. There were no rivets, seams, or screw holes. The entire maglev flying car looked like it was carved out of a huge piece of jade. Every part was seamless, and it was not something that could be produced by humans. What's the fastest speed of this car? In less than a minute, Guhan left the maglev flying car and asked the guard. Brother, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how fast it can go. Perhaps because he had received 10,000 renminbi from Guhan, the guard's attitude towards Guhan was much better. Ever since this maglev flying car was dug up, no one has driven it to their heart's content. Naturally, no one has been able to drive it to its maximum speed. So, we don't know what the maximum speed of this maglev flying car is. What's the upper limit displayed on the dashboard? Generally speaking, if the maximum speed of a maglev flying car was 1,000 km per hour, then the upper limit displayed on the dashboard would be 1,200 km per hour. So, based on the markings on the dashboard, the maximum speed of the maglev flying car could be calculated. I don't know either. The guard waved his hand. This maglev flying car doesn't even have a steering wheel in the driver's seat. Not to mention something like a dashboard. In fact, other than 2 chairs, there's nothing else in the maglev flying car. Not even a steering wheel. Then, how do we control this maglev flying car? Behind Guhan, Reina Kosaka could not help but ask. This was the first time she had spoken since coming to the warehouse. Use your mind. The guard gave Guhan a very sci-fi answer. As long as you're in the driver's seat, the maglev will be able to move with just a thought. It can even speed up, decelerate, and turn according to your will. According to one of my brothers who has driven this maglev flying car before, This maglev flying car feels like it's his own legs. He can move it however he wants. If that's the case, then this maglev flying car is controlled through human brainwaves. Guhan said thoughtfully. Brainwave control technology was already in its infancy even before the apocalypse. However, even after 1,000 years, brainwave control technology was still facing many problems. Humans still did not have the perfect technology in this area. So, maglev flying cars still used the more primitive manual control technology or AI automatic control technology. Can I get in the car and try driving? Ji Yuhan couldn't help but ask. No. The guard rejected him without hesitation. Chapter 753. Big Brother. Go to the bathroom. Guhan extended a hand towards the guard. Then, the personal terminal on Guhan's arm suddenly projected a line of words. On it was clearly written the words 50,000 renminbi. Our boss said that if any outsider gets into this hovercraft, he or she can disappear right under our noses with just a thought. So, no one is allowed to enter the driver's seat of this hovercraft, not even us. So, I'm sorry. The guard said with a pained expression when he saw the 50,000 renminbi. Then let me speak to your boss. Guhan said again. No, absolutely not. The guard still refused. Our boss said that he would not speak to any outsiders. Even we rarely speak to our boss. Don't even think about it. At this point, the guard's face was already showing signs of impatience. I say, are you going to buy it or not? If not, then get out of here. Don't disturb my business. All right, then give me a price. Guhan did not have the time to waste with these people. He guessed that these people would not dare to use a fake hovercraft to deceive him. Otherwise, they would be more than happy to go to the Discipline Inspection Commission's prison. Oh, that's not right. They did not have the qualifications to enter the Discipline Inspection Commission's prison. They would probably just randomly find a prison where some prisoners who had not seen a woman for decades were locked up. A fixed price. 66,666 renminbi. The guard revealed a price that sounded a little scary to the ears of ordinary people. However, to Guhan, this price seemed exceptionally cheap. Previously, he had actually bought a super hovercraft for 66,666 renminbi. It was even cheaper than that Yang Huang 3008. Where else could he find such a good deal? Therefore, Guhan agreed to this price on the spot and happily paid the full amount. He even added an additional 10,000 renminbi to each of the guards. And so, under everyone's happy smiles, Guhan finally boarded the super hovercraft made by the prehistoric civilization. Connecting consciousness, consciousness connected. Beginning confirmation. First, Master's animal species, species confirmed, serial number A001 animal human, meets the basic requirements of the operator. Dear operator, welcome to the Scientific Research Vehicle serial number 44757865. You are now free to pilot the Scientific Research Vehicle serial number 44757865. This thought flashed in Guhan's mind. However, this thought was not like the human mind tools that used words to transmit thoughts. Instead, it was a purer thought. This kind of feeling could not be described with words. Those who sensed it all knew what it meant, but when they really wanted to describe it, they could not say a single word. Get in. Ji Yuhan shouted at the top of his lungs, but Reina Takasaka, who was waiting by the car, did not say a word. She just stood there without moving. What? Didn't I tell you to get in? Guhan said impatiently. This car doesn't have a seat for me. Takasaka Rina repeated herself 3 times before she could finish her sentence. It was just as Takasaka Rina had said, there was no seat for her in the car. That was because this flying car was an F1 racing car from before the apocalypse. There was only one seat for the driver and no other. That's not a problem, Guhan said calmly. Although there is only one seat, the space is huge. You can sit in front of me, and I'll give you half of the seat. Who wants you to give me half of the seat? Guhan's words made Takasaka Rina even angrier, or more accurately, she blushed even more. When people squeezed into buses or cars, they would definitely encounter situations where these two people had to sit in the same seat. Generally speaking, there were two positions when two people squeezed into the same seat. Either the seats were split in the middle, with the two people sitting on each side, squeezing half of their buttocks together, or the larger person would sit on the seat first and spread his legs, giving the empty seat to the other person. If the two people were simply friends, they would usually choose the first position. Only those couples who were very close to each other would choose this kind of ambiguous second position. It would be fine if Takasaka Rina and Guhan used the first position to squeeze into one seat, and Takasaka Rina could bear with it for a while. But the problem was that this flying car was just as Guhan said, with a lot of space in the driver's seat. But the space was vertical and not horizontal. This flying car was less than 0.6 meters wide, and sitting Guhan's 0.5 meter wide but was already very strenuous. If Takasaka Rina's 0.4 meter wide but was added to the mix, it was impossible to imagine how awkward it would be, and how the two buttocks would be squeezed together. So for Guhan and Takasaka Rina, the second position was the only reasonable solution. But Takasaka Rina seemed to be unable to accept the fact that she had to sit on Guhan's lap. Even after Guhan urged her repeatedly, she still refused to get on the car. "Do I have to write 3,000 words just to get on the car?" Guhan mumbled in a language that even he did not understand. Suddenly, a sword aura shot out from his hand and wrapped around Takasaka Rina's waist, pulling her into the flying car. "Holy shit! That's a superpower," one of the guards said dumbfoundedly when he saw Takasaka Rina being pulled into the flying car by something invisible. "Idiot! That's not a superpower, it's the sword aura of a swordsman." The person who spoke to Guhan was quite knowledgeable. He actually recognized that Guhan was using sword aura. But the next moment, the guard's expression changed drastically. "This is bad. This man is a swordsman. Boss has said that we are not allowed to do business with swordsmen." After saying that, the guard hurriedly approached the hovercraft, wanting to pull Ji Han off the hovercraft. Unfortunately, it was too late. The moment the guard took a step forward, the hovercraft shot out of the warehouse like a rocket. In less than 2 seconds, it disappeared from the guard's sight. "Damn it. Where's 3? Come out. Why the F***ck did you bring a swordsman here?" The guard shouted 3's name angrily. 3 was the shop assistant who led Guhan to the warehouse. Unfortunately, when Guhan arrived, 3 seemed to have sensed something and left the warehouse. "Boss, it's me." The guard immediately reported to his boss. "Boss, the person who bought the flying car is a swordsman. What should we do now? He shouldn't be able to leave Yangjing City in time. Should we send someone to block him at the exit?" "Not necessary." "Why?" After hearing the answer from his boss, the guard asked curiously. "Because I'm useless." The guard stupidly repeated his boss's answer, and then immediately reacted. He immediately threw away the gun in his hand and wanted to run away, but it was too late. The entire warehouse suddenly let out a huge explosion, and then completely turned into ashes. A few minutes later, the fire truck arrived and found that the workers inside had been burned to ashes. According to the investigation, it was found that these workers had illegally stacked a large amount of gasoline in the warehouse. Then another worker courted death by smoking in the warehouse and finally ignited the gasoline and caused an explosion. The entire investigation report was very detailed and convincing. This matter was sealed in the archives of the fire department, and no one cared about the real story behind it. "Let me go. I don't want to sit on you." When the flying car started moving, the sword aura that Guhan had bound Rina Takasaka disappeared. Rina Takasaka was able to break free and quickly moved her butt away from Guhan's body. "Watch out for your head." Before Ji Han could finish his sentence, Rina Takasaka slammed her head on the roof of the flying car, creating a crisp sound. Looking at Rina Takasaka's clumsy reflexes, Ji Han found it hard to connect this Rina Takasaka with the Rina Takasaka who almost killed him a few months ago in the Miling mountain range. "You don't have to worry about my business." Rina Takasaka glared at Guhan. Suddenly, she realized that the seat was indeed quite spacious. So, she simply sat on the ground. Although it was a very uncomfortable position and she had to curl her legs up, it was the best position she could think of to separate herself from Guhan. Guhan did not pay much attention to Rina Takasaka's choice. As long as she could quietly stay in the driver's seat and not cause trouble for him, it was fine. Compared to Rina Takasaka, Guhan was more interested in figuring out how this flying car worked. From the 10 minutes of driving, Guhan did not feel any obvious feeling of a buttock being pushed under his butt. That was because a normal flying car would use a magnetic jet under the chassis to release gas to hover in the air and then drive at high speed. Therefore, no matter how advanced a flying car was, the passenger would inevitably feel a force pushing upward from his butt. This was scientifically known as the feeling of a buttock being pushed. However, this flying car did not have such a feeling. Not only was there no feeling of a buttock being pushed, he could not even feel the feeling of a buttock being pushed. Sitting in this flying car, it felt like it was parked on the road. But in reality, the hovercar was moving forward at a speed of 100 km per hour. If not for the constantly changing scenery outside the window, Ji Han would have had a hard time believing that this was a moving hovercar. "This is real black technology," Guhan exclaimed. "You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.